It's already plugged in. All right, there it is right there. Yeah, hold on a second. How do I make that go away?
Minute.
Larry Elder Show. Welcome. We are, as you hear from the background music, live in Cleveland, Ohio. My home base is the ReliefFactor.com studios of AM 1420 The Answer. My daytime job is 9 to 11 a.m. I do a program here, soon to be 9 to noon. But I do that show here in Cleveland on WHK, and so glad to be sitting in tonight for an extra segment or two or three hours of fun and frivolity for the Sage. I welcome your phone calls when time allows. 888-971-SAGE. That's 888-971-7243, of course. You can also experience this program by podcast and all of Larry's podcasts at LarryElder.com. If you're in El Dorado, of course, you know how to do that. Coming up on the big show today, Larry has been kind enough to give me the forum to do whatever I wish, and I wish to talk to some smart people. One of them is Dr. Everett Piper, who is a best-selling author. You probably read his book. It was his best-selling book from 5 years ago, which was born out of a letter he actually wrote to his students. He was president of Oklahoma Wesleyan University, and he wrote a letter to his students telling them to stop being babies. The letter was, "This is not a daycare, it's a university." In other words, stop crying like a bunch of little snowflakes, seeking safe spaces and shelters and animals to soothe you and all that other garbage. This is not a daycare. He turned that essay, which went viral, into a book, which became a bestseller. Well, the sequel is out now. It's called Grow Up. Just that simple. Grow Up is Dr. Everett Piper's new book. Life isn't safe, but it's good, and there's a great meaning to that. I've already talked to Dr. Piper about this book tonight. Today, you are going to hear from him coming up at the bottom of this hour. In the second hour of the program, Patrick Wood, Executive Director of the Citizens for Free Speech, is going to talk to us about an unbelievable, almost impossible thing. 2 Supreme Court justices, one on each end of the political spectrum, conservative and liberal. In other words, constitutionalist and activist, both agreed on the level of political discourse and the danger it poses for this country. How about that? Both calling for some civility in speech. So Patrick Wood will talk to us about that. Then at at the top of the third hour, rather, I should say. I'm always going to refer to things in Eastern time zone because that's where I sit, so I'll try to avoid that. But at the top of hour number 3, Christopher Rufo is going to join us, and he is going to shock you with some facts about critical race theory. I know Larry talks about this all the time. But critical race theory needs to be defined for what it really is. And he gave a speech, did Christopher Rufo, last month at Hillsdale College, where I'm proud to say that my daughter is a sophomore up in Michigan. And an excerpt of that speech that he gave at Hillsdale was put in the latest Hillsdale newsletter called Imprimis. And it'll shock your senses when you learn about what critical race theory really is all about and how you are going to encounter it. Just period, point blank. It's going to be in your boardroom or in your break room or in your meeting room or in your social circles, or you are going to have to deal with it in your kids' schools. And I don't mean just college. I mean K through the end. So Christopher Rufo is going to talk to us about that. So 3 great guests today. And, of course, I will welcome you at 888-971-SAGE. I want to start by saying this. The police in Brooklyn Center, Minnesota, should have been far more aggressive and far more violent to Daunte Wright. Now, I want you to ponder what I just said, and I want you to make sure you know that I didn't misspeak. I want you to understand that this is not an error. The police in Brooklyn Center needed to be far more aggressive and violent to Daunte Wright. And do you want to know why? Because if they had been, he would be alive today. Now, if you don't understand that now, you don't understand anything about policing, and that's okay. We don't all understand everything about everything. So let me try to educate you a little bit. I have not gone through a police academy, but I have talked to enough officers, and I have enough reason and common sense after talking to them to understand and explain exactly how this is supposed to work. The lies you were told at the beginning of this terrible, tragic situation, the lies you were told was that Daunte Wright was pulled over because he had air fresheners blocking his rearview mirror, which would be a pretty ridiculous reason to pull somebody over. And that's true. It would be ridiculous. And it didn't happen. He was pulled over because he had an expired tag, an expired license plate, which absolutely is a reason to pull someone over. Now, what you need to know is how things work. Police officers, when they pull somebody over for a traffic violation, whether it be speeding or lane changes or not coming to a complete stop or whatever the case might be, or expired tags, the first thing they do is call in your tags to the dispatch. And they say, run a check on the person who owns that car and that license plate. And then they find out if there are things like, active warrants for their arrest. Lo and behold, there was an active warrant for Daunte Wright. What was that active warrant for? The answer matters. You need to understand this. The answer absolutely matters. He wasn't wanted on an outstanding warrant for jaywalking. It wasn't for selling loosies or illegal lottery tickets. It wasn't for some mild, superficial, nobody really gives a darn crime. He had an outstanding warrant for his arrest from 2 years earlier in which he was charged with an attempted aggravated armed robbery, in which he was alleged to have choked a woman in trying to steal $820 from her with an accomplice and held a gun to her head during that attempted crime. So understand this now. The dispatcher told the officers, including Kimberly Potter, who is now resigned from the force, now charged with second-degree manslaughter for her shooting, her tragic, incompetent, clumsy shooting of Daunte Wright. But that wasn't her biggest mistake. Once Kimberly Potter and the training officer, or the trainee rather, she was the training officer, a 26-year veteran. She's been around the block a few times. Once the dispatcher informed her that this individual was wanted for a violent gun crime. That's what his warrant was for. The way she and they approached him needed to be extraordinarily different than what it was. 10 years ago, 12 years ago, 15 years ago, maybe even 8 years ago, really before Ferguson and the war on cops began because of lies and misinformation about police officers hunting black males, particularly unarmed black males. So as little as 8 to 10 years ago, if officers got a warrant or a report back from dispatch that there was a warrant for a driver they had just pulled over for a violent gun crime, do you know what they would have done? They would have treated that driver like a violent gun criminal. And when they went to enact the arrest, they would have been what I said they needed to be at the top of this conversation: aggressive and violent. They would have surrounded his car with guns drawn. They would have been loud and menacing and intimidating, and rightfully and justifiably so. They would have screamed in menacing and intimidating voices to get out of the car right now. Show me your hands. Hands. Hands in the air. On the ground right now, on your knees. Right now, on your face. Lay down on the ground. Keep your hands above your head. And then, you know what they would have done? And what they should have done? They would have gotten on top of him with their knees in their backs. Or in his back, rather. And yes, wait for it, I'm going to say it, on his neck. Because that is a proper restraint technique that officers are taught. Now, not for 9 minutes, which is where we get into the George Floyd situation, but until he could be handcuffed safely and securely. You understand what I'm saying here? They would have arrested him violently and aggressively because he was considered to be a gun criminal. I've got a lot more on this. I'll come right back on the Larry Elder Show.
This is Carol Platt-Liebau for townhall.com. Calling new Biden legislation an infrastructure plan is like calling a shark a dolphin. They both may have dorsal fins, but you mistake one for the other at your peril. Don't be fooled. Only 5% of the bill's spending would actually go for roads and bridges, what normal people think of as infrastructure. Add in items like Amtrak and broadband, and you're still only at 30% of the eye-popping total of $2.3 trillion. And you're supposed to pay for all of this with the biggest tax increase since 1968. Here's what's worse. The bill is actually about leftist social engineering. It would end right to work, something the left hates because it guarantees no one can be forced to join a union or pay union dues in order to hold a job. Ending it offers a rich new source of campaign contributions for Democrats. Calling a shark a dolphin doesn't make it one. I'm Carol Platt-Liebau.
Trending now on America First with Sebastian Furka.
And how hard was it for 3 vaccines to be created in less than a calendar year? Could you give us some of the inside story? How hard was it to get the U.S. government with the corporations to create that historic success?
Well, it was very hard. We had an FDA that takes a long time to approve things, as you know. You had Fauci saying it's going to take 3 years, maybe much longer. Most people thought you couldn't do it in 5 years. Most people thought you'd never even get a vaccine. I felt confident. And we did something else. We spent billions of dollars on manufacturing the vaccine before we even knew if it was going to work. It was a calculated risk. And if we didn't do that, you wouldn't have had it for 9 months after the date that they announced. which, as you know, because of what I did with drug prices, with the favored nations clause, that's going to be the biggest thing ever, assuming Biden keeps it, for drug prices. The drug companies aren't exactly in love with me, and they announced it 2 days after. I think everyone knew we were right there, but they announced it 2 days after. Now, supposing they announced it before, though, Sebastian,
right,
the press would have played it down. So if they announced it before, they would have acted like no big deal. When they announced it after, they made a big deal out of it. But between the FDA, who we pushed at a level that they've never been pushed before. So we got the vaccine done in less than 9 months, and it would have taken 3 to 5 years. I don't think they ever would have had it.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
You stared down China. You put Russia back in their box. Now we have an incumbent in the White House who gives national addresses about female-shaped body armor and maternity flight suits. What do our enemies, the ones you had to deal with, what do they think of the current incumbent?
I think they're laughing at us like they've never laughed before. Our political, and you could say this, politically correct armed forces, where they're sending out documents talking about all sorts of things that shouldn't be discussed, that shouldn't even be thought about. You look at what's going on legally within the Army. I mean, I actually now I asked somebody the other day, so if a general tells a private what to do, and if the general's slightly hard,
All right, 20 minutes now, 21 minutes after the hour. Thanks for joining us. Bob France sitting in for the Sage here in Cleveland, Ohio, the ReliefFactor.com studios of AM 1420, The Answer. I want you to understand clearly what I'm saying. You may say to yourself, what is this guy talking about when he says that the police should have been more violent with Dante Wright? They shot him and killed him. Isn't that about as violent as it gets? The answer to that question is no, because it didn't need to get there if they had been violent the way they should have when they tried to arrest him. Now, why would they not do what I described in the first segment? Why would they not surround him with guns? He is wanted for a violent gun crime. Why would they not have surrounded him with guns drawn? Why would they not have been loud and forceful and intimidating, screaming at him to get on the ground? Why would they not take those steps to put their knee in his back or on his neck until he was handcuffed and completely restrained? Why wouldn't they do that? You know the answer why they won't do that. Because cops are all on body cam, and they don't want to be accused of excessive force. So if they don't go up to a violent gun criminal like Dante Wright and treat him with respect and kindness and pretty please with sugar on top, would you stand there, please, and would you place your hand behind your back ever so peacefully and allow me to put this iron bracelet on it? Would you then bring your other hand back there to join it so that I can hook them together? We're now going to walk really slowly and carefully over to the police cruiser, and I'm going to ask you to get in it peacefully. Can I explain something to you? Dante Wright was facing 20 years in prison, maximum allowable by law, for the crime that he had a warrant for. 20 years in prison is a pretty good incentive and a pretty good motivation for a criminal to do what? To try to escape. To try to escape. And what these officers did in treating him gently because they didn't want to be accused of being forceful or violent or mean or look like they're picking on the poor black driver, they allowed him access to his car. They didn't even close the driver's side door when they started to arrest him. They left it open. They were gentle with him instead of forcing him to the ground. They tried to cuff him standing up and allowed him to push away the officers and jump back in the car, which of course led to the tragic incompetence of Kimberly Potter. And when I say tragic incompetence, I fully believe she thought she had her taser. The video is very easy to hear. It's not ambiguous. Taser, taser, taser. I'll tase you. I'll tase you. She was warning, which is a normal communique to her fellow officers, that I'm about to deploy the taser, so stand clear. And then, of course, she fires the taser that wasn't the taser. She fires the taser that turns out to be the handgun. Now, how could she mistake the taser for the handgun? I don't know, especially 26 years in on the job. But she did. And as soon as she fired at what turned out to be a gun, she said, holy crap, blank, I just shot him. If she and they had been more aggressive and more violent to Daunte Wright when it came time to arrest him, there wouldn't have been need for the violence that cost him his life. Now, don't get me wrong. He's not an innocent pawn in all of this either. He's just not. You understand? He made the decision to try to avoid that arrest for the warrant that he was outstanding on him. He knew he was facing the 20 years possibly, and he broke away, and he made a decision that led to a terrible outcome. He owns some of this too. But what is owned by the police officers isn't the fault of the police officers when they have been not allowed over the course of the last decade to be cops. Everyone's worried about how it's going to look on the dash cam. Everybody's worried about how it's going to look on the body cam. Everyone's worried about being accused of excessive force or being racist, especially if they pull over a car and God forbid it happens to be a black man. Oh my goodness, we've got to be as kind and as gentle as humanly possible, especially in Minnesota, about 10 miles away from the courthouse where the George Floyd thing, with Derek Chauvin is going on. Got to be kind, got to be gentle, got to be nice, got to be peaceful. Don't want to be too rough with him. Don't want to yank his hand behind his back to handcuff him because it might hurt his shoulder. Then we'll be accused of abusing and physically assaulting this African-American male. They are not allowed to be cops anymore, and that's what led to Daunte Wright's death. Now, if you want to try to change my mind on that, I will take that conversation. I will have that conversation. To me, if they would have been much more aggressive and, yes, necessarily forceful and, yes, violent against him in effecting the arrest, he'd be alive today. Officer Kimberly Potter would not be in hiding. Well, she's not in hiding. She is. She and her family, she got them out of Minnesota quickly before she was charged with second-degree manslaughter and held originally without bail. Eventually, they allowed her to post bail, and she did. So now she's in hiding until her trial. And you know and I know what the outcome of that trial is going to be. There is no way that she's not going to prison. Her life at age 48, I think she is, 26 years in, is over. The life that she ever knew, because she wasn't allowed to be a cop at the beginning of the arrest. So it ended up in her, of course, making that tragic mistake. And make no mistake about that. She's going to prison. For crying out loud, when the city manager is fired for telling in a press conference, the assembled press gaggle, that she's going to get due process before they fire her or before they do whatever they're going to do with her. Because, it's what every American in this country gets. It's called due process. He said she's going to get due process. The mayor fired him for saying that. The chief of police in his first press conference points out the obvious. It was an accidental discharge of her weapon. She meant to discharge her taser. Got the wrong one. Can you call her incompetent? Sure. But it was accidental. He got fired for saying that. Anybody who comes to her defense, even from a constitutional perspective, is going to be canned. And that means there is no way that a jury is going to be allowed to do anything but find her guilty and lock her up. So this is a pretty amazing thing, to be quite frank with you. It's a very amazing thing, and it's a very disturbing thing. It did not have to be this way. I do want to hear from you at 888-971-SAGE. That's 888-971-7243. I would give you social media, but I tried to swear off social media. I still dabble a little bit on Facebook, and I still dabble with a new account that I have on Parler and on Gab. If you look to find me there, if you would like to find me there, look up France Radio, FRANTZ Radio, and leave your thoughts. But the best thing you can do is let's talk about this together, no matter where you might be across this once and future great country. And I say that intentionally. It was once, it will be again. It is right now a very, very dangerous place. And it's on the verge of becoming something unrecognizable. So that's why we're fighting together to save her. 888-971-SAGE, 888-971-7243. After the timeout, Dr. Everett Piper tells us all to grow up. What does he mean by that? You'll find out next on The Larry Elder Show.
Trending now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
The Vice President of the United States of America. Honest to goodness, this is like a skit right out of the TV show Veep. You know, bad language, but it's honestly one of the most hysterical political satires in the history of political satires. And Kamala Harris is Julia Louis-Dreyfus. What's her character's name? It's Selena Myers, right? Selena Myers, right. I think Kamala Harris is the actual character played by Julia Louis-Dreyfus in the TV series Veep. Because there's been an announcement made moments ago about Vice President Kamala Harris. You're going to think I'm making this up.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
Burbank is a particularly despicably run city. Their commitment to freedom is an embarrassment. They're the ones I condemned years ago, as I explained earlier. You can't smoke a cigar in a cigar shop in Burbank. Health über alles. It is a form of health fascism, which I've said health über alles, right? Health above all. Power to the restaurant was shut off March 13th after the city received permission from an L.A. County Superior Court judge to do so. The judges it doesn't matter. There's no recourse. Nobody values freedom. They only value what the health authorities say. It's an amazing thing. These people go to college and graduate school and then question nothing. Oh, the health authorities. That's it. That's all you have to say, health authorities. How about if I think I'll die, I won't go into Tin Horn Flats? How's that? Why is that not an option? Oh, because then I'll give it to others. Well, then you can't have anything. No place can be open, which is what they wanted and did. Dr. Fauci can't explain why the Texas numbers are not going up. Remember, he warned against that. Texas opened up. Gee, they're not dropping dead like flies.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
Well, I'll tell you, folks, and this is where secular conservatives have really not thought this thing through. When you don't have obedience to God, you have obedience to authorities. That's what the founders knew. Even an atheist conservative needs to understand that. But they don't. This has been Burbank, let's see. This has been in a challenging situation that may not be easily understood and resolved. What does that mean? This is the statement from the Burbank fascists, the little people who run Burbank, especially when you are dealing with persons who willfully disobey the law. What is it? Who set the law? Who made the law? The health authorities? You make the law? That's it? Just.
Yes, indeed, and the Sage is off tonight. So glad to be in for him. Bob France coming to you live from the ReliefFactor.com studios here of AM 1420, The Answer in Northeast Ohio, Cleveland, Ohio to be precise. Every Thursday on my program, I'm privileged to talk to this gentleman that's about to join us, and I've learned so much about him and about his mindset over the course of the last few years, and I want to bring him to this national audience. He is nationally known. You may see him on TV from time to time on Fox News and other locations, but Dr. Everett Piper is a former president of Oklahoma Wesleyan University. He is a well-known columnist and pundit for the Washington Times. He is also a podcaster, radio podcaster in his own home state of Oklahoma, known best perhaps for a letter that he wrote, an essay, if you will, to his own students about 5 years ago, in which he declared that his university was not a daycare. It was not a daycare, it was a university. So stop with the snowflake, safe spaces nonsense and grow up. Well, that went viral. He turned it into a book that became a bestseller. It was called Not a Daycare, The Devastating Consequences of Abandoning Truth. And now, 5 years later, here he is with the sequel, Grow Up. Life isn't safe, but it's good. Dr. Piper, good to talk to you again. How are you, sir?
Oh, Bob, as always, I'm honored to join you. Thank you.
I need to lift Dr. Piper's audio just a little bit. Very hard to hear him there, but it's good to have you here, Dr. Piper. So let's do what you and I talked about on my program last week. This book was just released on Tuesday, the 13th, so congratulations. Grow Up is now officially available. But let's go back a little bit before we talk about the current state of things with Grow Up. Remind everybody what the purpose behind Not a Daycare was, your bestseller from 2015.
Okay, thank you, Bob. I hope you can hear me okay now.
You sound fine now. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. It was 2015 I wrote the opinion piece that you just referred to. It was an open letter to my students where I said, if you expect to be coddled, if you expect to be comforted rather than challenged, then go someplace else. The university isn't supposed to be a safe place. It's supposed to be a place to learn. And then I concluded after about 800 words of ranting a bit, my land, this is a university. It's not a daycare. Now, usually when I write these open letters in Northeast Oklahoma, 5 people read them and 3 people care. But for whatever reason, when I wrote that, within 2 weeks, 3.5 million people had clicked on that story. And you and Drudge and Dreher and Limbaugh and Beck and everybody cared because I was the university president that dared to call out the snowflakes and say, stop it, stop it. This isn't supposed to be a safe place. It's supposed to be a place to learn. And a little adversity, a little disagreement, a little debate, a little dissonance is actually a good thing. In fact, that's what the ivory tower was established to do, to challenge you to grow up and act like an adult. Well, that was 2015, 2017 when I made that commentary, and Grow Up is the sequel to that, whereas Not a Daycare was me basically saying, can you believe that we're actually in this place in our culture where we've got students demanding safe places, which included at the time counseling centers with Play-Doh coloring books and videos of frolicking puppies to help these poor little 20-year-olds feel good about finals week. Well, that was the problem. Grow Up, Life Isn't Safe, but It's Good. The book that just came out this week is the solution. It's loaded up with 20 lessons, 20 chapters on the importance of and how to act like an adult in a world that looks like a daycare more on a daily basis.
I love your description, Dr. Piper, and your explanation of that subtitle from C.S. Lewis when you talk about life isn't safe, but it's good. Explain to everybody who doesn't know this yet what that phrase means.
Okay. The subtitle is as important as the catchphrase, grow up. In the Chronicles of Narnia, C.S. Lewis tells us that the great lion Aslan is not safe, but he's good. Well, if you've read the Chronicles, you know that Aslan is the Christ figure. So what C.S. Lewis is telling us is that Jesus is not safe, but he's good. The Word made flesh and dwelling among us, the second person of the triune God, is not safe, but he's good. Well, let's paraphrase that particular point that Lewis is making. The great lion of the academy isn't safe, but it's good. The Great Line of Human Freedom isn't safe, but it's good. The Great Line of the Ivory Tower, the Great Line of the Constitution, the Great Line of growing up and acting like an adult human being is never safe. It isn't supposed to be. Life isn't safe, but it's good. There's a huge difference between goodness and safety, and Lewis is telling us we should prefer the first, goodness, over being safe.
That is just so very well articulated. I love that as the subtitle for a lot of reasons, which we'll get into. We're going to take our hard time out here. Dr. Everett Piper will come back and talk more about the solution to the problems outlined in Not a Daycare. These solutions are found in the sequel to that book by Dr. Piper, which is called Grow Up, Life Isn't Safe, But It's Good. And we'll continue with him as we continue on the Larry Elder Show right after this.
Trending now on The Hugh Hewitt Show.
You know that we have Byron York of the Washington Examiner and Fox News join us most Tuesdays. He is with us this morning. He's just back from the border, and his Washington Examiner story is headlined, "The Border is Even Worse Than You Think." Hello, Byron. How are you?
Good morning, Hugh. Doing fine, thanks.
No, I think it's pretty bad. Did you see border czar Kamala Harris when you were down there?
You know, I looked and looked and looked, but she was not there. And it's actually pretty obvious why she is not there, which is if she went, she would draw attention to just enormous failures, one after the other, by this administration. I just think it's no secret that no politician would want to go and take a big group of press with her and say, here, look, we're failing here, and we're failing here, and we're failing here. So,
now, Byron, where did people like to know what a reporter's life is like? Where did you go, and how long did you stay at each of those places?
This was in, I should say, in McAllen, Texas, and in Mission, Texas, which is one of the worst spots now. And the takeaway from this, the takeaway is the government's response to this incredible surge of illegal border crossers is entirely improvised. I mean, it is totally jury-rigged. They are scrambling to deal with this. And the reason they're scrambling to deal with this is that President Biden, in his first days in office, just threw out the foundation of the way the government deals with migrants with nothing ready to replace it.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
Here we go.
Breaking now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
Vice President Kamala Harris will travel to Guatemala and Mexico in her role in tackling the root causes of the migration crisis we're facing at our southern border. I'm not kidding you. Kamala Harris made an announcement. She was asked by reporters at a roundtable discussion about whether she's going to visit the border itself. She didn't answer. Then she said her job is to focus on the root cause of the migration problem, and that she will be traveling to Mexico and Guatemala soon. She will be involved, according to the White House, in high-level diplomatic work. Yeah, it's diplomatic work, all right. She's going to go to Guadalajara to try to deal with our immigration problem. Great. We're in great hands. Senator John Thune, Republican from South Dakota, had a suggestion about infrastructure, since we're paying just pennies on the dollar for infrastructure. He had a kind of a novel idea. Senator Thune has a suggestion about how we can spend some of that infrastructure money.
And now they've got this humanitarian crisis, national security crisis down there, which is desperately in need of a solution. One of the things they could do, there's been a lot of talk about infrastructure. The administration is talking about infrastructure bill. One important piece of infrastructure is to finish building.
All right, it is 16 minutes before the top of the hour. Bob France in for Larry Elder today. Thanks for being with us. I'm live in Cleveland, Ohio, at the ReliefFactor.com studios, and my guest is in Oklahoma in his home state, Dr. Everett Piper, best-selling author of Not a Daycare from 2016, The Devastating Consequences of Abandoning Truth. His sequel, his follow-up to that is Grow Up, Life Isn't Safe, But It's Good. Dr. Piper, you, in your introduction, you talk about our culture being stuck in perpetual adolescence, and in particular, cancel culture being childish and self-focused. And it's funny, when I read those words in that description, you know, we all probably did it, and if we didn't, we certainly remember our siblings doing it, or maybe our own kids doing it, when they are forced to hear something they don't want to hear, sticking their fingers in their ears and then yelling, la, 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 I can't hear you, I can't hear you, I can't hear you. You're throwing that temper tantrum that they're going to drown out whatever you're saying if it's something they don't want to hear. I feel like that's what cancel culture is.
It is. In fact, stop and think about Nancy Pelosi tearing up the president's State of the Union address. That's exactly what she did. Stop and think about the Major League Baseball Association taking its ball literally and going home and saying, we're not going to play with you any longer because you said something we don't like. This is the chickens coming home to roost, really, is what it is. When we started teaching self-absorption and narcissism at Berkeley and Brown and every other institution in between, we shouldn't be surprised to find that we've got a bunch of self-absorbed narcissists that have graduated from Berkeley and Brown, gotten jobs at Google and Facebook and Twitter and the Major League Baseball Association, and that they're now canceling everything they don't like. I said in 2016-17 during the Not a Daycare swing that what was practiced in the classroom would be practiced and would come home to roost in our culture. What's taught in the classroom will be practiced in our culture. And here we are. We taught them to be self-absorbed, and now when they're 30 years old, 40 years old, and 50 years old, we shouldn't be surprised that they are. Garbage in, garbage out. But there's a solution. Bob, you know what I'm going to say right now. There's a solution. If garbage in, garbage out was the problem, then maybe goodness in and goodness out will be the solution. If we return to the time-tested truths, for example, maybe we should start teaching a little natural law rather than narcissism. We could start there. And maybe start reconsidering that the fact that our civics classes should teach, let's say, self-evident truths rather than self-absorption and self-actualization. The solution is to go back where we consumed the carcinogen in the first place. And we were consuming ideological carcinogens in the classroom and, frankly, in the church and, frankly, helicopter parenting. The ideological carcinogens can be corrected if we stop consuming them and start consuming ideas that are healthy.
Dr. Everett Piper is our guest. We're talking about his new book, just released on Tuesday and already killing it on the Amazon charts. So you want to add your name to that list and pick this book up as quickly as you can. Dr. Piper, you mentioned Berkeley and Brown, obviously, and you could talk about Oklahoma Wesleyan, your own students. That's why you put out that call saying, knock this off. We're not going to become that. But it's more than just those, institutions of higher learning or higher indoctrination now. This stuff isn't even just high schools. It's K through 8. It's from the very beginning that they're being taught this narcissism, that what I say and how I feel is something that you have to accept and you have to nurture and you have to actually help foster, even if it's something that is completely false.
Well, everything that we're talking about right now that's controversial as a nation, Black Lives Matter, critical race theory, the 1619 Project, the Snowflake Rebellion, cancel culture, all of this stuff is the same exact thing. It's I want my pound of flesh. You did this to me. I feel threatened. I feel sad. I don't feel loved. My feelings are going to trump the facts, and therefore I'm the victim, and I deserve to be heard. This is selfish. This is a temper tantrum. This is adolescence. This is perpetual childhood. This is not what living like an adult looks like. An adult accepts the fact that everything isn't safe. Do you remember when you were an athlete, your coach told you no pain, no gain? Mm-hmm. He recognized that diversity, or adversity, I should say, adversity is a good thing. He recognized that a challenge was a good thing. He recognized that debate and disagreement and dissonance was a good thing, as the Proverbs tell us, as Solomon tells us in the Proverbs. As iron sharpens iron, let one man sharpen another. That implies sparks flying. That implies tension. That implies growth. Those are the principles that I try to recover in this book through the 20 lessons of how to function as a mature adult in this infantilized world.
Doctor, I've got 2 minutes left. You know, you're doing interviews in a lot of places with a lot of people who love you and love your point of view, loved Not a Daycare, and have said, yeah, I want to be a part of Grow Up. But I want to give you 2 minutes to respond to the critics. What kind of backlash are you getting from this thus far, and how do you respond to that?
Well, you know, I often like to respond to the critics by asking a question rather than engaging in an argument. The question, and actually it's what Jesus did in his style of apologetics, he always, almost always, just asked a rhetorical question to force the worldview of his opponent become apparent, and they'd expose the lie, and and he confronted it by the question. For example, do you want to throw the first stone? And then he just shuts up, and he watches their worldview implode. So, in the face of this cancel culture, Black Lives Matter, for example, critical race theory, here's the question. Do you really think we ought to start judging people by the color of their skin rather than the content of their character? Now let's deal with the cancel culture's cries of tolerance. Ask them this question. Can you tolerate my intolerance? Do you hate hateful people? Are you sure that nothing is sure? Do you know that nothing can be known? Do you see my point? My point is their worldview is self-refuting. It's hypocritical. It doesn't hold water. They're sawing off the branch upon which they sit. It will come tumbling down. And when it does, we can be there as adults prepared to help them put the pieces together again. But until they experience that crisis, there's no reason for anybody to change. As long as they're comfortable, as long as they're safe, they can live in mom's basement. They don't care. They have to experience the dissonance to grow.
You are a holier man than I, because when you said we were going to be there to watch them cut the branch off on which they sit, to be there to help them put it together, I was going to say we're going to be there to laugh. But maybe that's just the evil side of me coming out. Dr. Everett Piper is not so evil. He is brilliant, however. You're going to want to get this book, Dr. Everett Piper's Grow Up. Doctor, thanks so much for the time. We appreciate it. Bob France in for Larry Elder. We'll be back.
Thank you.
This is Carol Platt-Liebau for townhall.com. Calling new Biden legislation an infrastructure plan is like calling a shark a dolphin. They both may have dorsal fins, but you mistake one for the other at your peril. Don't be fooled. Only 5% of the bill's spending would actually go for roads and bridges, what normal people think of as infrastructure. Add in items like Amtrak and broadband, and you're still only at 30% of the eye-popping total of $2.3 trillion. And you're supposed to pay for all of this with the biggest tax increase since 1968. Here's what's worse. The bill is actually about leftist social engineering. It would end right to work, something the left hates because it guarantees no one can be forced to join a union or pay union dues in order to hold a job. Ending it offers a rich new source of campaign contributions for Democrats. Calling a shark a dolphin doesn't make it one. I'm Carol Platt-Liebau.
Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
And how hard was it for 3 vaccines to be created in less than a calendar year? Could you give us some of the inside story? How hard was it to get the U.S. government with the corporations to create that historic success?
Well, it was very hard. We had an FDA that takes a long time to approve things, as you know. You had Fauci saying it's going to take 3 years, maybe much longer. Most people thought you couldn't do it in 5 years. Most people thought you'd never even get a vaccine. I felt confident. And we did something else. We spent billions of dollars on manufacturing the vaccine before we even knew if it was going to work. It was a calculated risk. And if we didn't do that, you wouldn't have had it for 9 months after the date that they announced, which, as you know, because of what I did with drug prices, with the favored nations clause, that's going to be the biggest thing ever, assuming Biden keeps it, for drug prices. The drug companies aren't exactly in love with me, and they announced it 2 days after. I think everyone knew we were right there, but they announced it 2 days after. Now, supposing they announced it before, though, Sebastian, the press would have played it down. So if they announced it before, they would have acted like no big deal. When they announced it after, they made a big deal out of it. But between the FDA, who we pushed at a level that they've never been pushed before. So we got the vaccine done in less than 9 months, and it would have taken 3 to 5 years. I don't think they ever would have had it.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
The infrastructure plan is incredibly reckless. Incredibly.
I don't have my slippers yet. I'm on my slippers. I got to tell you about My Pillow real quick. Larry talks about it all the time. I talk about it all the time on my show when we're talking about My Pillow. I love My Pillow, and I love my towels. They're phenomenal. I want my slippers. Mike has done it again. These amazing new slippers. How can they be anything short of amazing compared to everything else that Mike has produced? They're just top of the line. Took over 2 years for Mike Lindell to develop the new slippers, designed to wear indoors and outdoors all day long, made with the MyPillow foam and impact gel to prevent fatigue, made with quality leather suede as well. For a limited time, Mike is offering 40% off his new My Slippers. The My Slippers are so comfortable, Larry tells us anyway, that you'll want to get some for the whole family. I've got to get mine quickly. I'm very jealous of those who have it already. Go to MyPillow.com right now. I got to do it too. Click on the radio listener square. Use the promo code Larry. You'll also get deep discounts on all the other great stuff that MyPillow produces, including the Giza Dream bed sheets, the MyPillow mattress topper, the MyPillow towel sets. Call 800-890-1843. Use the promo code Larry. That's 800-890-1843. Use the promo code Larry. Get yourself some My Slippers. That's what I got to do. All right, time for maybe one or two quick ones here before the top of the hour. We're going to go to St. Paul, Minnesota, kind of where it's all happening right now in the Twin Cities. Darren, you're on the Larry Elder Show. Bob France sitting in. Go ahead, Darren.
Hello, Bob. I think you and the doctor that was on prior to you are 100% correct. I think if anybody is responsible for people being shot, whether you're black, African American, whatever, is the media and the radical left. We should have public service announcements 5 times a day on every outlet there is in media, whether it's print media, radio, television, explaining to people if a police officer asks you to stop or asks for your ID or gives you a command, you listen to them and you comply. The time to argue is when you're in a court of law, not when you're on the streets and the police officer is in a high stressful situation. And I think it's unfortunate that we have a hate culture that was started by the Barack Obama administration against police officers. We're going to end up with people that the only people that will become police officers are those that are as corrupt as somebody who is a criminal.
Yeah, I cannot agree more. I've got a 17-year-old son who's on his way into college this coming fall for the first time. And, of course, hey, what are you going to major in, son? What are you thinking about for a career and these kind of things, which we all have with the conversations we all have with our kids. And one of the things we started saying to our son about 3, 4, 5 years ago was, what do you think about policing? Because, everybody knows my son and everybody who knows me knows what I do and how I approach these police officer situations. I'm a strong supporter of law enforcement. It's just common sense to me. Anytime there's a situation in which normal people are running away and fleeing, and these brave people are running toward it to stop and neutralize the threat so that we don't get hurt, I just have the utmost respect. Does that mean every cop is perfect? No. Every teacher is not perfect. Every doctor is not perfect. Every scientist is not perfect. But they do something the rest of us can't and won't do. So I said, son, what do you think about that? Very quickly, we put the kibosh on that. I don't want my son joining a profession like this where their lives are going to be in danger and their reputation is going to be torn. Hour 2 of the Larry Elder Show coming up.
Trending now on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
President Biden doesn't want to leave strategic ambiguity behind unless it applies to Johnson & Johnson, which he trashed yesterday. He is sending a delegation to Taiwan that he's not sending. It's a non-official delegation. And then, for reasons that I do not understand, he's sending Richard Armitage. He of infamous role in the Karl Rove, Scooter Libby meltdown that led to the Fitzgerald special counsel, because it was Armitage who leaked the name of Valerie Plame. Why is Richard Armitage going with Chris Dodd to Taiwan?
I have no idea. It makes no sense. And consider the fact that on Monday, 25 Chinese aircraft, including 18 fighters, 4 nuclear-capable bombers, 2 sub-hunters, and an early warning aircraft entered Taiwan's airspace. And this incursion is part of a disturbing trend of increased CCP belligerence toward Taiwan. So far in response, we've seen the administration say some of the right things, but I think this move makes no sense. I mean, for example, Secretary Blinken on Sunday insisted that the U.S. would ensure Taiwan has the ability to defend itself. Well, it would be a great follow-up if they expanded the commitment to help Taiwan to acquire advanced anti-ship cruise missiles. And all of this, I think, starts with ending strategic ambiguity. There was a time when it may have served American interests. Part of the rationale behind the policy was the potential, if far-fetched, scenario in which Taiwan was the aggressor. But those days are long gone. Taiwan poses absolutely no military danger to the PRC, but every day that Beijing isn't quite sure if an American president would sacrifice American lives to keep Taiwan free is a dangerous day.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
This is Carol Platt-Liebau for townhall.com. Calling new Biden legislation an infrastructure plan is like calling a shark a dolphin. They both may have dorsal fins, but you mistake one for the other at your peril. Don't be fooled. Only 5% of the bill's spending would actually go for roads and bridges, what normal people think of as infrastructure. Add in items like Amtrak and broadband, and you're still only at 30% of the eye-popping total of $2.3 trillion. And you're supposed to pay for all of this with the biggest tax increase since 1968. Here's what's worse. The bill is actually about leftist social engineering. It would end right to work, something the left hates because it guarantees no one can be forced to join a union or pay union dues in order to hold a job. Ending it offers a rich new source of campaign contributions for Democrats. Calling a shark a dolphin doesn't make it one. I'm Carol Platt-Liebau.
Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
If you are not taking large doses of vitamin D, there's only one possible reason that I can think of. 2. One, you're just not aware of how important it is to your immune system. The other is you're lazy, which I understand. Takes an effort to buy something, but it's pretty minimal effort. Why Dr. Fauci is not screaming vitamin D is infinitely more helpful than masks.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
And how hard was it for 3 vaccines to be created in less than a calendar year? Could you give us some of the inside story? How hard was it to get the U.S. government with the corporations to create that historic success?
Well, it was very hard. We had an FDA that takes a long time to approve things, as you know. You had Fauci saying it's going to take 3 years, maybe much longer. Most people thought you couldn't do it in 5 years. Most people thought you'd never even get a vaccine. I felt confident. And we did something else. We spent billions of dollars on manufacturing the vaccine before we even knew if it was going to work. It was a calculated risk. And if we didn't do that, you wouldn't have had it for 9 months after the date that they announced, which, as you know, because of what I did with drug prices, with the favored nations clause, that's going to be the biggest thing ever, assuming Biden keeps it, for drug prices. The drug companies aren't exactly in love with me, and they announced it 2 days after. I think everyone knew we were right there, but they announced it 2 days after. Now, supposing they announced it before, though, Sebastian, the press would have played it down. So if they announced it before, they would have acted like no big deal. When they announced it after, they made a big deal out of it. But between the FDA, who we pushed at a level that they've never been pushed before. So we got the vaccine done in less than 9 months, and it would have taken 3 to 5 years. I don't think they ever would have had it.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Hugh Hewitt Show.
The infrastructure plan is incredibly reckless, incredibly reckless. It's going to make our infrastructure problems worse because it repeats the failed mistake of the past where we overinvest and we discount the cost of maintaining infrastructure over the life cycle of a project. The fundamental problem is our assets are depreciating and crumbling more quickly than they were back then. And this is going to make that problem far worse. There is so many ridiculous proposals in this bill. And now they're coming to us saying when they have $2 trillion for every grab bag progressive initiative under the sun, that we can't afford to grow the defense budget by 3 to 5% every year. It makes absolutely no sense.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
The Vice President of the United States of America. Honest to goodness, this is like a skit right out of the TV show Veep. You know, bad language, but it's honestly one of the most hysterical political satires in the history of political satires.
And I am in Cleveland, Ohio, and I like to think I have good hands. I used to play tight end. Wide receiver is a younger person, tight end is an older person. But, yeah, I've got some decent hands. The hands to handle this show, however, a little bit different. I really appreciate you being here, and I really seriously welcome your input. I love talking to great new audiences. I certainly love even more listening to great new audiences. I learn so much when I talk to people that I don't normally talk to. I've got my regulars on my talk show here in Cleveland, Ohio, the ReliefFactor.com studios of AM 1420 The Answer, where I sit right now. I talk to people daily. And I get to know the regulars, and I learn a lot from them, but sometimes you hear it from a different perspective. It means a little bit more, and so that's what I welcome at 888-971-SAGE. That's 888-971-7243. I am here tonight in large part to push back and fight back against the narrative that you cannot escape on your television screen. You cannot escape it on your computer or your phone or on your radio. The narrative, once again, that there it is again, another one. Another unarmed black male shot by police. They're under attack. We are under attack. Policing is systemically racist. It's intentional, as Sharia Tlaib said, the congresswoman from Michigan. It's intentional, and they approached him with aggression and violence. They didn't approach him with nearly enough aggression and violence to save his life, as I explained in the first hour of this broadcast. So, I'm here to push back against that, and I'm here to bring facts to the situation. Now, One of my go-to moves whenever this ridiculous story is told again and again and again, and it's fictional, this fictional belief that police are somehow out there targeting African-American males. One of my go-to moves is to bring Heather McDonald to the program. Heather McDonald is a student, and she's obviously a tremendously wise pundit and researcher. And she has written a book called The War on Cops. She did a PragerU video in which she summarized some of the obvious findings about the reality of the threat that African Americans face when confronted with police officers compared to what white Americans face when confronted with police officers in similar situations. So this is just it's an automatic for me. I want you to listen to a little bit of what Heather McDonald said.
When it comes to the subject of American police, blacks, and the deadly use of force, here is what we know. A recent deadly force study by Washington State University researcher Lois James found that police officers were less likely to shoot unarmed black suspects than unarmed white or Hispanic ones in simulated threat scenarios. Harvard economics professor Roland Fryer analyzed more than 1,000 officer-involved shootings across the country. He concluded that there is zero evidence of racial bias in police shootings. In Houston, he found that blacks were 24% less likely than whites to be shot by officers, even though the suspects were armed or violent.
No.
Does the truth matter?
Not to the media, not to Don Lemon, not to Trevor Noah, not to Benjamin Crump, not to anybody and everybody on MSNBC, the New York Times, the Washington Post. No, it does not matter. Statistics these are irrefutable. These are FBI crime statistics. These are DOJ crime statistics. These are state-reported crime statistics, and they are unequivocal. African Americans do not face a greater threat of harm from police officers than white Americans. In fact, it's exactly the opposite.
An analysis of the Washington Post's police shooting database and of federal crime statistics reveals that fully 12% of all whites and Hispanics who die of homicide are killed by cops. By contrast, only 4% of black homicide victims are killed by cops.
That is a very important statistic, as is this one.
But isn't it a sign of bias that blacks make up 26% of police shooting victims, but only 13% of the national population? It is not, and common sense suggests why. Police shootings occur more frequently where officers confront armed or violently resisting suspects. Those suspects are disproportionately black. According to the most recent study by the Department of Justice, although blacks were only about 15% of the population in the 75 largest counties in the U.S., they were charged with 62% of all robberies, 57% of murders, and 45% of assaults.
You just have to let those numbers sink in and understand the reality here. Nobody is happy about this. Nobody. The idea that 15% of the populations in those biggest cities are responsible for 60% of violent crimes, 50% of homicides, etc., everything that you just... Nobody's happy about it, but the bottom line is, to borrow a phrase from Ben Shapiro, these facts don't care if it makes you unhappy. These facts don't care if it makes you appear to be biased or bigoted, because facts don't care about your feelings. The reality of the situation is African Americans encounter police in use of force situations far, 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 far more frequently than Caucasian Americans do in use of force situations. And yet they are shot less, far, 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 far less often than the Caucasian Americans.
In New York City, blacks commit over 3/4 of all shootings, though they are only 23% of the city's population. Whites, by contrast, commit under 2% of all shootings in the city, though they are 34% of the population. New York's crime disparities are repeated in virtually every racially diverse city in America.
In every racially diverse city in America. 75% of shootings are done by blacks, despite being just, 13% of the population? New York City, it was around 20% of the population, I believe. 23%, there it is, I found it. Caucasians are responsible for 2% of the shootings, despite being an overwhelming majority of the population. Who's going to encounter police more often?
The real problem facing inner city black communities today is not the police, but criminals. In 2014, over 6,000 blacks were murdered, more than all white and Hispanic homicide victims combined. Who is killing them? Not the police and not white civilians, but other blacks. In fact, a police officer is 18.5 times more likely to be killed by a black male than an unarmed black male is to be killed by a police officer. If the police ended all use of lethal force tomorrow, it would have a negligible impact on the black death by homicide rate.
I just, sometimes, a wise man once said, if someone said it better than you, then just let them say it. And that's what I'm doing here. Heather McDonald has done the studies and run the numbers. A police officer is 18.5 more times likely to be shot by a black male than an unarmed black male is to be shot by a police officer. Not twice as often, not 3 times more likely, not even 10 times more likely. 18.5 times more likely to be shot. And if you were to take away all police uses of lethal force against African Americans right now today, the impact on the number of black homicide victims in this country would not be felt. It would be negligible. So nobody wants to hear this. But you need to hear this. African Americans know that the best friend they have if they live in high crime communities, which are largely urban centers, they are. African Americans know the best friend. Hold on a second, Heather. The African Americans know that the best friend that they have is the police. In the city in which I live, in Cleveland, Ohio, where they had over 190 homicides last year, 190. In a city where the population has dwindled over the course of the last 20 or 30 years from 690,000 to around 380,000. They're setting records for numbers of homicides. In this population, would you know, that 90%, a full 90% of the 911 calls that are made with requests for police assistance come from black residents. Blacks know that their friend is the police. When there is danger, they call police for help. They're not afraid of police. They trust and rely on police. And yet, do you think you'll ever hear that stat on CNN? You ever think you'll hear that stat about 18.5 times more likely on MSNBC? No. Do you think Ben Crump will ever acknowledge this information? No. Minority neighborhoods beg for help from police, but they can't get it because of the myth that police are racist. Part of the problem is communication. We can't talk to one another with civility anymore. That's going to be the topic of our next conversation. My friend Patrick Wood, who is the executive director of Citizens for Free Speech, is going to talk about civility in communication, which is crucial to us surviving this. We'll be back.
Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
Will the never Trump class still exist, or can we finally rid ourselves of those who say they're conservatives, Mr. President, but who really don't love this country?
Well, you'll always have rhinos, and in many ways, the Democrats beat out the rhinos. It's sometimes some of these people that within the party, when you have, and obviously the Mitt Romneys, the little Ben Sasses, the people that are Murkowski in Alaska does just a horrible job. When you have people like that, they don't seem to have. They stick together. Democrats stick together. They have horrible policy. Fortunately for the Republicans, you wouldn't have a Republican Party.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Charlie Kirk Show.
And so while their TV network ratings are cratering, their web traffic remains rather substantial. Therefore, this revelation is not insignificant. And guess what? This guy's the technical director. This guy oversees a lot of the digital operations. In Cut 50, James O'Keefe describes to Sean Hannity what Project Veritas has released. I've never seen James O'Keefe wear a tie. It's really interesting. Good for him. Play tape.
You saw the tapes. He's admitting the network is propaganda. He says they were trying to get Trump out without admitting that's what they were doing. You saw me confront him about that. I just want them to be honest. He's not being honest. They're deceiving. And he says that they're helping Biden. They're painting Biden in order to help him with his aviator shades. So this is an extraordinary admission. It's the #2 trending story globally on Twitter, which is ironic because Jack Dorsey banned Project Veritas from Twitter, yet our stories trend on Twitter. That means the truth is getting out there no matter what.
And so CNN is the 85th most trafficked. It is Alexa. I was right. Website in global internet engagement, most trafficked site. And our 240, and Alexa, I'm sorry, Fox, I'm getting so much information here. Fox is 246. Is that right? Am I reading that right, Connor? So CNN is a top 100 website. So don't underestimate the value of CNN. The cable network is a waste of time. No one watches that. It's a very unserious network. Their digital dominance is a very real thing. It is. Therefore, what James O'Keefe is revealing needs to be taken seriously. So my point is look at CNN more holistically outside of just Jake Tapper and Wolf Blitzer and Fredo. That's not the entirety of their influence.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
Here we go.
Breaking now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
Vice President Kamala Harris will travel to Guatemala and Mexico in her role in tackling the root causes of the migration crisis we're facing at our southern border. I'm not kidding you. Kamala Harris made an announcement. She was asked by reporters at a roundtable discussion about whether she's going to visit the border itself. She didn't answer. Then she said her job is to focus on the root cause of the migration problem. And
Yes, indeed. 21 minutes after the top of the hour. Thanks for joining us. Bob France sitting in for the Sage from South Central. Joined now by Patrick Wood, the executive director of Citizens for Free Speech, which you can find online at citizensforfreespeech.org, doing extraordinarily important work. And I work with Pat, full disclosure here. I work as communications director for CFFS as we try to teach people to, not only use their freedom of speech, but to regain and restore the rights of freedom of speech and First Amendment rights that have been taken away from us by big government during especially the course of this COVID-19 pandemic. And Patrick Wood joins us now to talk about what it means to exercise our free speech responsibly. Patrick, I almost said good morning to you because I usually talk to you at that time, but good day to you, Patrick Wood. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing great, Bob. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. And yes, there is a growing heated battle over free speech and the First Amendment in America. It's none too soon, but we're hanging by a thread right now as far as the ability to communicate with each other.
There is a great article, Patrick, that you shared with me earlier today that I want to ask you about in a moment here about the importance of civil free speech. But talk about what you just said first. Talk about the erosion of free speech rights. And it's, it's not organic. It's intentional. There is a movement afoot to silence certain segments of the population because it is believed that what they have to say could be dangerous to a political agenda. Is that what it's all about? Is it all about politics?
Well, it is all about politics and about the narrative, I have to say. It's not just about American politics, because this is a global phenomenon that's going on. Of course, there are no Democrats or Republicans in Europe or in Asia or in China, but it is a global issue. But in America, you're right, there is a sharp division between those who are promoting globalization in America and those who are against it. That's generally the populist movement in America. And anything contrary to the narrative that's being spit out by the big media and big tech and so on is being silenced and censored, even to the point now where it's trickled down into society and people are actually self-censoring because they're afraid that they're going to get attacked. And so they figure it's just better to shut up and not say anything, rather than to express their ideas. It's extremely dangerous.
Yeah, well, they're afraid of being canceled. And to put it more bluntly, people are self-censoring because they're afraid that if somebody hears, we're talking about teachers, we're talking about, really people all across various aspects of the workforce who are afraid to say anything publicly, because if the wrong person hears it and takes it the wrong way, even if the intention was benign, you run the risk of losing your job. You run the risk of losing your reputation and being canceled. So civility in speech is completely gone. So let's talk, Patrick Wood of Citizens for Free Speech, about two Supreme Court justices from the opposite sides of the ideological spectrum. We're talking about Neil Gorsuch, a Trump appointee that is considered to be uber conservative and certainly a constitutionalist. And we're talking about Sonia Sotomayor, an Obama appointee who is as far left and considered to be more of a liberal activist on the bench than an originalist. The two of them getting together to call for civility because they see really destruction in this country's future if we don't figure it out. Can you talk about that?
Well, they basically called it like an existential threat to us, not just, an incidental damage. They understand the value of civil discourse. And civil discourse is really the intention and the heartbeat of free speech as is represented in the Constitution and the First Amendment. They didn't get much else right in this article, by the way. They blamed social media for disinformation and stuff. They never said anything about disinformation on major media sources, as we both know is really more the problem than social media. But they did agree on this one point, that Americans need to learn how to have civil discourse again without trying to get into a fist fight, after two words come out of somebody's mouth. And this is dangerous to our they call it a democratic system. It's dangerous to our republic. And the founding fathers, by the way, pointedly warned us about this. If communication were to stop, that the Constitution basically is going to be invalidated, and that's where we are right now.
We're talking with Patrick Wood, who's the founder and executive director of CFFS, which is Citizens for Free Speech, online at citizensforfreespeech.org. Patrick, that's what you teach, right? That's what we teach in terms of activism at the local level. In all 50 states, we encourage, there's some 30,000 members and growing of Citizens for Free Speech. The idea isn't to challenge people who have a different point of view as you in a violent way or in a confrontational way. It is to practice effective communication through civility, and you even teach lessons on it, right?
It is. We have a great training class called Citizen Ninja Stand Up to Power. It's not about martial arts, but it's about using the art of communication to be effective in your civic setting in your town or city or wherever you might live. And we're having great success with this, especially in the West where this training was originally developed. And we're taking it to the nation now. We're teaching people how to communicate. We're teaching them, if anything, how to communicate in the civic arena and be effective at sharing your ideas, your information with people who may not agree with you. And that's okay. This is the American way, that we should be able to talk to people who we disagree with and try to persuade them, try to get them, budge them off a dead center, perhaps. It does require a compromise in the end, but our director of training says, if you don't have a seat at the table, you are what's for dinner tonight. So there's just no option at this point.
That's very well said. That's a great way to analogize it. So let's talk about what else Citizens for Free Speech is doing right now, because, look, we're all for liberty. We're all for freedom. We're all for defending not only the First Amendment, but all of the amendments, the entire Bill of Rights in particular. And Pat, right now, as we try to restore our rights to not have to wear the face masks, you want to free the face, burn the mask. That's a movement of CFFS. Our rights to be able to go to church and worship as we see fit without being told how many can be in a pew, et cetera, et cetera. Now we're in the vaccine realm. And I'm not going to tell people to get the vaccine or not. What I am calling for is freedom to get the vaccine or not, with the without being punished and without being restricted from moving, buying, selling, or doing anything else if I choose not to get the vaccine. Of course, they're called vax passports. What is CFFS doing to try to head that off and restore or keep the rights of the American people?
Well, as an issue, a very important issue, too, by the way, is vaccine passports right now. This is one of many issues that our members are concerned with and would be working on in their local communities. This one in particular can be stopped or can be definitely crippled at the city level through city councils and so on. This sort of activity, the vaccine passports, will be banned in their particular town. And this can be done. But it takes citizens to get involved, to go to the city council and lobby them and talk to them. I mean, lobby not in a negative sense, but hey, you live there, right? It's your city. You should get out there and talk to them and say, look, you need to protect us here and keep this vaccine passport stuff out of our city or out of our county.
That's the method and the message of all of CFFS. And I apologize for the interruption, but we're out of time. That's the message and why we want people to become members of Citizens for Free Speech online at citizensforfreespeech.org. Thank you, Patrick Wood. Back after this.
Thanks, Paul.
Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
Burbank is a particularly despicably run city. Their commitment to freedom is an embarrassment. They're the ones I condemned years ago, as I explained earlier. You can't smoke a cigar in a cigar shop in Burbank. Health über alles. It is a form of health fascism, which I've said health über alles, right? Health above all. Power to the restaurant was shut off March 13th after the city received permission from an L.A. County Superior Court judge to do so. The judges it doesn't matter. There's no recourse. Nobody values freedom. They only value what the health authorities say. It's an amazing thing. These people go to college and graduate school and then question nothing. Oh, the health authorities. That's it. That's all you have to say, health authorities. How about if I think I'll die, I won't go into Tin Horn Flats? How's that? Why is that not an option? Oh, because then I'll give it to others. Well, then you can't have anything. No place can be open. Which is what they wanted and did. Dr. Fauci can't explain why the Texas numbers are not going up. Remember, he warned against that. Texas opened up. Gee, they're not dropping dead like flies.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
You know that we have Byron York of the Washington Examiner and Fox News join us most Tuesdays. He is with us this morning. He's just back from the border, and his Washington Examiner story is headlined, "The Border is Even Worse Than You Think." Hello, Byron. How are you?
Good morning, Hugh. Doing fine, thanks.
No, I think it's pretty bad. Did you see border czar Kamala Harris when you were down there?
You know, I looked and looked and looked, but she was not there. And it's actually pretty obvious why she is not there, which is if she went, she would draw attention to just enormous failures, one after the other, by this administration. I just think it's no secret that no politician would want to go and take a big group of press with her and say, here, look, we're failing here, and we're failing here, and we're failing here. So,
now, Byron, where did people like to know what a reporter's life is like? Where did you go, and how long did you stay at each of those places?
This was in, I should say, in McAllen, Texas, and in Mission, Texas, which is one of the worst spots now. And the takeaway from this, the takeaway is the government's response to this incredible surge of illegal border crossers is entirely improvised. I mean, it is totally jury-rigged. They are scrambling to deal with this. And the reason they're scrambling to deal with this is that President Biden, in his first days in office, just threw out the foundation of the way the government deals with migrants with nothing ready to replace it.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now.
All right, 33 minutes past the hour. That leaves us with 27 minutes before the top of the hour. Bob France sitting in for the Sage from South Central. I'm live in Cleveland, Ohio at the ReliefFactor.com studios of AM 1420, The Answer here in Cleveland. Phone lines are now open at 888-971-SAGE. That's 888-971-7243. Thanks to Patrick Wood for an important conversation. I really cannot urge you enough to visit citizensforfreespeech.org. Again, I represent that organization as an Ohio chapter leader and as a national communications director. And we need more membership in order to have more force when it comes to what we want done in Washington and in each of our state capitals. So please consider that. I'm going to go back. And I've kind of been, all over this today because how can I not be? The defense rested today in the Derek Chauvin case in Minnesota. The violence has continued for a fourth straight night. And by the way, I'm talking about up in Minneapolis, St. Paul, Brooklyn Center, Minnesota. I am very, very, very much over the mainstream media, and this includes Fox News in this instance, describing the ongoing assaults on private businesses and police officers in these cities as being clashes continue between protesters and Minnesota police. They make this sound like this is an equal, agreed upon battle. Clashes continue. It's not clashes. It's thugs and criminals and punks who are all agreeing to get together to go and destroy things out of, number one, their emotion, and number two, their political agenda. And then there's the police on the other side trying to defend private property and trying to defend communities as a whole, including individuals who could be in jeopardy if they weren't there. This isn't like the police saying, all right, you guys want to go? Let's get it on. This isn't equal combat. These are criminals, and then there are law enforcement officers trying to stop them. So I want to be clear about that. So with what's going on up in Michigan and what's going on, for example, in Chicago, because they just released a police video, body cam video of the death of a 13-year-old last month, Adam Toledo, and this has a lot of people upset as well. When you have all of these things going on, and then there was a shooting in Columbus, Ohio, staying closer to my neck of the woods here in Columbus, Ohio, of a man who was actually on a gurney. He was actually on a gurney. Did you hear about this story? Columbus, Ohio police released body cam footage yesterday of a fatal shooting at Mount Carmel St. Anne's Hospital. According to the authorities there, a 27-year-old black man, capitalized B, of course, named Miles Jackson, was taken there after being found passed out. Officers struggled and eventually had to shoot him after they discovered a concealed weapon on him and his refusal to put it down. This is a Fox TV affiliate, SYX, walking us through just a little bit of that video. And, of course, as this is radio, you're going to have to let your mental pictures take over. And for some reason, we're not
Miles Jackson being asked to get off the gurney so officers can collect his things.
I'm going to grab all this stuff, put it in this bag, okay?
An officer pulls out a pack of cigarettes, some credit cards, and a bullet.
Uh-oh. Got a little bullet action.
He continues patting Jackson down, then feels something and motions to his partner.
Get his arm behind his back right now.
The officers struggle to get Jackson handcuffed.
You on my arm! Give me your hat now!
An officer tases Jackson, bringing him to the floor. As the struggle continues, we hear a gunshot believed to be from Jackson. Then one from an officer, but his gun jams.
Get your right hand up! We're trying!
Officers yell at Jackson to get his hands up and drop his weapon 85 times.
In case you missed that tail end of that, officers yelled at Jackson and told him to get his hands up 85 times. And he refused to do so, leading to another tasing and eventually a shooting that killed him. Now, this is about as plain can be. On video, the discovery of the concealed weapon on the individual Miles Jackson, his refusal to surrender the weapon and surrender to the police, that ends up in him being shot. And you know what they did anyway in Columbus, Ohio last night? They rioted. Protesters storming police precincts. How dare you? I mean, it's getting to the point where if you are African American and you are not necessarily a law-abiding citizen in this country right now, you almost feel emboldened to do whatever you want. Because if somebody tries to stop you, the cops are in trouble. We'll be right back.
Trending now on The Charlie Kirk Show.
What actually is election interference? Information is power, we are told. We know that to be true. When people consume information, they make choices. Information is easily spread and also easily spread incorrectly. We've been lectured by the left on misinformation and disinformation for years, from people that run message boards on websites I can't even find, and somehow they're a threat to our republic. What if I told you that a network that is mostly in airports, but also in 90 million homes, is actually a functioning Democrat super PAC?
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Dennis Prager Show.
Well, I'll tell you, folks, and this is where secular conservatives have really not thought this thing through. When you don't have obedience to God, you have obedience to authorities. That's what the founders knew. Even an atheist conservative needs to understand that. But they don't. This has been, Burbank, let's see, this has been in a challenging situation that may not be easily understood and resolved. What does that mean? This is the statement from the Burbank fascists, the little people who run Burbank, especially when you are dealing with persons who willfully disobey the law. What is it? Who set the law? Who made the law? The health authorities? You make the law? That's it? I just declare? Candid Camera, in its great days, you know, in the, I don't know, the 70s, they had a skit. You know, what they would do is they would set people up and then have a hidden camera show their reactions. In the middle of Manhattan, on one block, they put up a sign, "Backward Walking Zone," and almost everybody walked backward. Now, by the way, I would have too, just for the record, but as a joke, because I thought this is a crack up. But if it was meant seriously, this is New York City law that you must walk backward for a block, I wouldn't have done that. This is a very divisive issue within our city. Well, that's good news. I'm happy to hear it.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Hugh Hewitt Show.
President announced yesterday we're skedaddling from Afghanistan. That was not the Trump plan. The Trump plan was to leave troops at Bagram, as far as I understand it. Now we're not going to do that. What's going to happen to Bagram? It's going to be like Taliban Central.
Well, Bagram, I think there's a missed opportunity there to talk about the enduring relevance of Bagram, particularly in light of great power competition, right? In other words, if we go to war with China, bombers coming out of Bagram provide us with an opportunity to target Western targets for China, including their space and their counterspace assets. And I really think as we confront honestly the fact that the American people do want us to responsibly reduce our presence over time, we can have a grown-up conversation about where are the areas where we want to leave an enduring presence as we transition to great power competition, and Bagram is one of those. The other thing
All right, 16 minutes before the top of the hour. Bob France sitting in for the Sage with you for the duration today. I welcome your phone calls at 888-971-SAGE. That's 888-971-7243. And this talk show wants you to know the truth about the Georgia election law and why we support it. I can tell you I agree with every word of this wholeheartedly. And I've talked about it on my own local show in Cleveland, Ohio every day. Despite efforts to smear this law with untruths about its content, as long as public companies are getting involved in an effort to hurt the state of Georgia, our company wants to stand by the truth and correct the record. We also believe that Major League Baseball, Delta, Coca-Cola, and other businesses have been badly misled about the new Georgia law and should act to correct the record before consumers decide to fly other airlines, drink other beverages, and stay away from the ballparks this summer. We believe in voting security and the expanded voting access provided by the new Georgia law, and we urge you to join us in doing so. How do you do that? Sign the petition. Sign the petition, and we'll let all of these companies know of your opinion. It's at the top of the Larry Elder page, LarryElder.com, and you will see Stand with Georgia on a banner there. Click that and sign the petition. I can tell you this, I'll never drink another Coca-Cola. Not a chance. Not a chance. Not Coca-Cola, not Delta. I will not watch Major League Baseball. I'm done. I'll be honest with you. I have never been a boycott guy, right? I've never been I don't like who they are. I don't like what they do. Boycott them. I don't like that company. Boycott the sponsors, et cetera, et cetera. I don't do that. And the primary reason has been, I've talked about this in speeches that I've given, including the other night. The primary reason is that I don't believe that poor run-of-the-mill workers should have to pay the price for ridiculous decisions made by executives. You understand what I mean by that? You know, if Coca-Cola, for example, is boycotted by 75 million Trump voters, just to, as an example, it's not just the shareholders that are going to be hurt. It's not just the corporate executives, the board of directors, the CEOs, et cetera, et cetera. There's going to be layoffs, and there's going to be, Lord knows how many hundreds of bottlers and, workers in the manufacturing plant who are going to be laid off because we've hurt that business. So that's been my approach. I've been trying to, be kind and be more understanding and realize that the decisions made by executives that may harm other, individuals who work for the company. That's why I don't do boycotts. But I will tell you this. It's time for us to start fighting that kind of fire with fire of our own. It really is. We have to fight back with the same methods because it works for them. You understand what I'm saying? The left boycotts us and comes after our sponsors and comes after this, that, and the other, and it's called cancel culture, and they make great headway in advancing their agenda and narrative in shutting us up. And to me, it's time for us to push back and fight back. I don't want to hurt anybody by calling for boycotts, but I personally will announce that I am not using these products. I will not participate in these services or order these services from these companies that are doing this, that are just blatantly lying in an attempt to continue to steal elections. You heard me correctly, steal elections. That's what they're doing. So, it's important. You sign that petition at LarryElder.com and tell all of these companies in Georgia, but it may be too late for me. I don't know that I'm ever going to watch another baseball game. I did this with the National Football League last year, this past season, right up until, and I will admit, I got hooked because I've been watching football for 50 years. It's been my passion for a long time. Before I got into doing news and conservative news talk radio, I was doing sports talk radio for a long time. I worked for the Oakland Raiders and their broadcast network. I mean, all these I've been a football guy. So it was very hard for me when they decided to dedicate the NFL season to the Colin Kaepernick, support fund and all of the BLM this and all of the social justice that and all of the other nonsense. I turned it off. I got pulled back in when the Browns made the playoffs for the first time in seemingly 95 years. So I watched a little bit of that, and then I did watch the Super Bowl as Tom Brady made history. I felt dirty doing it. I did. And so baseball, it's not going to hook me the way football did at the end there. I'm done until baseball apologizes. And by the way, when is baseball going to acknowledge the obvious? That they just hurt millions of black workers and hundreds of black business owners in Atlanta, Georgia, and just gave $100 million of economic revenue and development to 76% white workers and residents of Denver, Colorado. They just said that they didn't like the election law because it was bad for black people. So they pulled the All-Star game and its $100 million of revenue away from the black majority city of Atlanta and gave it to a lily white majority in Denver, Colorado. When are they going to acknowledge that? It's simply staggering. 888-971-SAGE, 888-971-7243. We're going to go to a phone call here from Ron, who is calling us from Ohio. That's my home state here. So let's see where Ron is calling from. Hey, Ron, it's Bob in for Larry. What part of Ohio are you in, sir?
Grafton. You and I have spoken before.
Oh, okay. Well, it's good to have you here on the national show. Ron, go ahead. What's on your mind?
Well, I just want to say it's good to hear you get some national coverage here. But what I'm contemplating here is what would happen. Well, first of all, if I put myself in the position of a present policeman right now, and my employer is not supporting me, which is exactly what's happening to the police now, what am I going to do after they kick me in the can or kick me in the face for so long? I'm going to walk away and find another job. What happens when these guys finally get together and say, I've had enough, and they walk off in unison? What's going to happen?
Well, you know the answer to that. We're going to have more crime. There are going to be more people victimized. It is going to be more dangerous. We're all going to have to look out for ourselves. We're going to and thank you, Ron, for the question and for the phone call. And then of course they're trying to stop us from buying guns to protect ourselves. But I don't blame police officers who walk off the job now and retire or resign. And I certainly understand why the academy classes are now smaller in most academies than they've ever been before. Who wants to work in this environment? It's too dangerous and not worth it. We'll be back.
Trending now on the Charlie Kirk Show.
And so while their TV network ratings are cratering, their web traffic remains rather substantial. Therefore, this revelation is not insignificant. And guess what? This guy's the technical director. This guy oversees a lot of the digital operations. In Cut 50, James O'Keefe describes to Sean Hannity what Project Veritas has released. I've never seen James O'Keefe wear a tie. It's really interesting. Good for him. Play tape.
You saw the tapes. He's admitting the network is propaganda. He says they were trying to get Trump out without admitting that's what they were doing. You saw me confront him about that. I just want them to be honest. He's not being honest. They're deceiving. And he says that they're helping Biden. They're painting Biden in order to help him with his aviator shades. So this is an extraordinary admission. It's the #2 trending story globally on Twitter, which is ironic because Jack Dorsey banned Project Veritas from Twitter, yet our stories trend on Twitter. That means the truth is getting out there no matter what.
And so CNN is the 85th most trafficked. It is Alexa. I was right. Website in global internet engagement, most trafficked site. And our 240, and Alexa, Fox, I'm getting so much information here. Fox is 246. Is that right? Am I reading that right, Connor? So CNN is a top 100 website. So don't underestimate the value of CNN. The cable network is a waste of time. No one watches that. It's a very unserious network. Their digital dominance is a very real thing. It is. Therefore, what James O'Keefe is revealing needs to be taken seriously. So my point is look at CNN more holistically outside of just Jake Tapper and Wolf Blitzer and Fredo. That's not the entirety of their influence.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
Here we go.
Breaking now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
Vice President Kamala Harris will travel to Guatemala and Mexico in her role in tackling the root causes of the migration crisis we're facing at our southern border. I'm not kidding you. Kamala Harris made an announcement. She was asked by reporters at a roundtable discussion about whether she's going to visit the border itself. She didn't answer. Then she said her job is to focus on the root cause of the migration.
All right, 7:54. I'm sorry, 7:54 where I am. 6 minutes before the top of the hour, wherever you may be. I get into that Eastern time zone thing, so my apologies to you Central, Mountain, and Westers, and Pacifics, rather. 888-971-SAGE, 888-971-7243. Bob France sitting in for Larry Elder. Let's go back to the phones. We'll go to Louisville, Kentucky. Mike, you are on the Larry Elder Show. Go right ahead.
Yes, good evening. I just want to bring up that much of the reluctance to cooperate with the police that we're witnessing has to be explained by looking at it in a historical context. I mean, going back to right after the enslavement period was over, the policing systems in this country were very brutal. I mean, this is well documented, very brutal, infiltrated by white supremacists, Ku Klux Klan, all documented, all the way up to our lifetime. I mean, look at Congressman Lewis. Peaceful demonstrations, civil rights. People were not even promoting violence. And, you know, he got his head cracked. Other people were trampled over. You know, the police.
There have been a lot of bad things in our history. You're right. It's clear. Everybody knows that. What makes our country so unique and so special is the fact that we correct wrongs that have happened historically in our country, unlike places like communist China where they're still operating, for example, concentration camps, and they're executing and sterilizing, religious minorities, for example. So, yeah, we know about the history of the country and some of the problems. But what does that? Hold on, my friend. But what does that have to do? How does that help us today?
Well, the point I'm making, sir, is that you can't understand it and address it without looking at it in its historical perspective. Most of the relationship in the history of the relationship between the policing systems and the African American community has been confrontational, not based on anything African Americans originally did. It was based on the way
Mike, you're making excuses. You're making excuses for poor behavior and poor decisions.
That's most of the history, sir.
Mike, I've got bad news for you, sir. I hate to break this to you. But we do not live in 1885, and we do not even live in 1962. We live in 2021 right now, and policing is not a danger to the African American community. Not even close. I've given you the statistics. They are not debatable. They're not in any way, shape, or form ambiguous. Police officers are far more likely to shoot white people in physical confrontations than they are black people. And it's not close. Bob Franson for Larry Elder, right back.
This is Carol Platt-Liebau for townhall.com. Calling new Biden legislation an infrastructure plan is like calling a shark a dolphin. They both may have dorsal fins, but you mistake one for the other at your peril. Don't be fooled. Only 5% of the bill's spending would actually go for roads and bridges, what normal people think of as infrastructure. Add in items like Amtrak and broadband, and you're still only at 30% of the eye-popping total of $2.3 trillion. And you're supposed to pay for all of this with the biggest tax increase since 1968. Here's what's worse. The bill is actually about leftist social engineering. It would end right to work, something the left hates because it guarantees no one can be forced to join a union or pay union dues in order to hold a job. Ending it offers a rich new source of campaign contributions for Democrats. Calling a shark a dolphin doesn't make it one. I'm Carol Platt-Liebau.
Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
If you are not taking large doses of vitamin D, there's only one possible reason that I can think of. Two. One, you're just not aware of how important it is to your immune system. The other is you're lazy, which I understand. It takes an effort to buy something. But it's pretty minimal effort. Why Dr. Fauci is not screaming Vitamin D is infinitely more helpful than masks.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
And how hard was it for 3 vaccines to be created in less than a calendar year? Could you give us some of the inside story? How hard was it to get the U.S. government with the corporations to create that historic success?
Well, it was very hard. We had an FDA that takes a long time to approve things, as you know. You had Fauci saying it's going to take 3 years, maybe much longer. Most people thought you couldn't do it in 5 years. Most people thought you'd never even get a vaccine. I felt confident. And we did something else. We spent billions of dollars on manufacturing the vaccine before we even knew if it was going to work. It was a calculated risk. And if we didn't do that, you wouldn't have had it for 9 months after the date that they announced, which, as you know, because of what I did with drug prices, with the favored nations clause, that's going to be the biggest thing ever, assuming Biden keeps it, for drug prices. The drug companies aren't exactly in love with me, and they announced it 2 days after. I think everyone knew we were right there, but they announced it 2 days after. Now, supposing they announced it before, though, Sebastian, the press would have played it down. So if they announced it before, they would have acted like no big deal. When they announced it after, they made a big deal out of it. But between the FDA, who we pushed at a level that they've never been pushed before. So we got the vaccine done in less than 9 months, and it would have taken 3 to 5 years. I don't think they ever would have had it.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Hugh Hewitt Show.
The infrastructure plan is incredibly reckless, incredibly reckless. It's going to make our infrastructure problems worse because it repeats the failed mistake of the past where we overinvest and we discount the cost of maintaining infrastructure over the life cycle of a project. The fundamental problem is our assets are depreciating and crumbling more quickly than they were back then. And this is going to make that problem far worse. There is so many ridiculous proposals in this bill. And now they're coming to us saying when they have $2 trillion for every grab bag progressive initiative under the sun, that we can't afford to grow the defense budget by 3 to 5% every year. It makes absolutely no sense.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
The Vice President of the United States of America. Honest to goodness, this is like a skit right out of the TV show Veep. You know, bad language, but it's honestly one of the most hysterical political satires in the history of political satires. And Kamala Harris is Julia Louis-Dreyfus. What's her character's name? It's Selena Myers, right? Selena Myers, right. I think Kamala Harris is the actual character played by Julia Louis-Dreyfus in the TV series Veep. Because there's been an announcement made moments ago about Vice President Kamala Harris. You're going to think I'm making this up.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Charlie Kirk Show.
Now, James O'Keefe might be the most hated man from the American left, and that's saying something besides Donald Trump. The only issue that James O'Keefe has, the only issue, is that none of the networks cover his exposés. That no one in the mainstream power structure gives him the distribution he deserves. So that's why we're talking about it today. So now James O'Keefe will be on radio stations across the country in one of the top podcasts, and yes, on our live stream. So James O'Keefe and his team sat down with the technical director of CNN. And this video is so alarming on a variety of different levels. I'm going to let you listen to it for yourself. But the essence of the video is that the technical director for CNN admitted that their goal was to publish propaganda. I kid you not. He uses that word. And to get Trump out.
We got Trump out. I am 100% going to say it. And I 100% believe it, that if it wasn't for CNN, I don't know that Trump would have got voted out.
Our focus was to get Trump out of office, right? Without saying it, that's what it was, right?
Trump was, I don't know, like his hand was shaking or whatever like that. We broke.
Yes, indeed. Cleveland does rock. And why are you hearing that right now? Because that's where I'm located. That's why. Thanks to the great sage Larry Elder for allowing me to host the show tonight. I always appreciate the opportunity to talk to and listen to this highly educated audience. And it's tonight is no different. Tonight, it's night here anyway. It's 6 minutes after 8 here, 6 minutes after 5 maybe out there on the West Coast. So thanks to everybody for tuning in. We are live in Cleveland at the ReliefFactor.com studios of AM 1420. The Answer, that is my home base. We're going to stay on the topic of race now because how can we not? Our country is splintering. It really is. And it is not an accident. It is not organic. It is intentional. It is a part of a goal. There are people on the very far left, let's just call them what they are, Marxists, perhaps socialists, and it's all, of course, in the very same realm with communism, but their goal is to divide this country along racial lines with the intention on destroying the republic and rebuilding it into a Marxist state. And part of the way that they are doing that, if you have not yet encountered critical race theory in your professional life or in your child's student life, you will. I promise you that. In a boardroom, in a training session, maybe in a break room, certainly for your kids in their classrooms, you're going to encounter critical race theory. The real question is what is it? A lot of people have tried to define it. I don't know that I've seen a better explanation of it than what I read in the Imprimis newsletter. Imprimis is the newsletter of Hillsdale College. That is where my daughter is a sophomore, I'm very proud to say. And there was a speech given in March by Christopher Rufo about critical race theory. They excerpted that speech and ran it in Imprimis, and I read it 3 times already because it is so important for us to learn. And I asked Christopher Rufo if he would come on and talk about it in more depth, and he was kind enough to say yes. So Christopher Rufo joins us now. He is a writer and a filmmaker and a researcher, a graduate of Georgetown University, visiting fellow at the Heritage Foundation, former Lincoln Fellow at the Claremont Institute. So he's got some bona fides. Christopher Rufo, thanks for the time. How are you?
I'm doing very well. How are you?
I'm great. I really, really appreciate you carving out the time. I know you're a busy guy. I talked to your scheduler. You've got a lot going on, and you're on the move as well, traveling. So thanks for making time for us. And thank you for speaking to Hillsdale College last month. I read just, with so much interest, your great analysis of critical race theory. And I want you to give the thumbnail sketch, because of the time involved here, to our listeners. Critical race theory is essentially a euphemism for some of the more popular terms, and you talk about this, things like equity and things like social justice, things like inclusion, which are all positive sounding. Critical race theory is Marxism. That's not so positive sounding, and that's the reason why they have changed the definition of it. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Critical race theory is really the kind of underpinning ideology behind a lot of the buzzwords that you've probably heard. You've heard of equity, you've heard of diversity and inclusion, you've heard white privilege, you've heard white fragility. All of those things stem from this ideology of critical race theory. And as you alluded to in the intro, it's really just old-style Marxism, which divided society between oppressor and oppressed based on economic categories, whether you're a capitalist or a worker, and then they replaced it now with racial categories. So the oppressor is kind of white society, white supremacy, and the oppressed is people of color. But it's really the same old concepts, just refreshed with a new vocabulary and new class categories.
Okay, and so let's define those who are doing the defining, because when we first heard, for example, of Black Lives Matter, it sounded innocuous enough. It's like, hey, we're concerned about the number of African Americans who are being killed in confrontations with police. Black Lives Matter too. If it was as simple as that, I don't think we have any problems here. But Black Lives Matter has nothing to do with actually defending or saving or being concerned with Black lives. Black Lives Matter is a political organization with an agenda, and that agenda, as you just described, is Marxism. Can you tell us about those behind it?
Yeah, I mean, these are all related ideologies. Critical race theory is the set of ideas and practices. Black Lives Matter is the political vehicle. And as you've described, they're taking something that is true, right? Black Lives Matter. That's something that I think almost everyone, virtually everyone, 99.999% of Americans would agree with.
Sure.
But what they do is they play this double game, where they take a phrase that sounds good, they take something that is innocuous, something that has a kind of soft connotation, but then those are really the camouflage for something that is a much more radical political program. So if you look at Black Lives Matter, it's run by people who are self-described Marxist revolutionaries. If you look at their policies, it includes dismantling the nuclear family, and if you look at exactly what do they want in the end, it's really a system of race-based wealth redistribution, power redistribution, and moving away from the constitutional protection of individual rights into a new system of group identity-based rights that has yet to be articulated and, frankly, has yet to work anywhere in the world where it's been tried.
Okay, you just said something that is very important. We're talking to Christopher Rufo. He is a writer, filmmaker, and researcher, and he has written a tremendous piece, or actually as part of a speech that he gave on critical race theory. It hasn't worked anywhere it's been tried. Why would they be so eager to institute it here in a free country where things are working? Why would they try to repeat? I mean, it's the old definition of insane we always hear about, right? Insanity is repeating the same thing again and again and again and hoping for a different result. How do they think this would be any different?
Well, they always are trying to go after the same goal. The goal was laid out by Karl Marx in the mid-1800s, and it's this utopian vision, this idea that we could replace a capitalist mode of production with a communist mode of production, true democracy, true equality, where everyone has an equal share of the pie. And it's a nice utopian vision. It sounds good, but people are convinced that it just hasn't been tried in the correct way. First, they said, well, in the Soviet Union, it was because Russia was a backwards country and it became bureaucratized. Then you say China and Cuba and the rest of the countries that it didn't work in the mid-20th century. Well, there's another set of excuses. So they keep trying to change the formula, reaching after that same goal. And they're unwilling to accept that it's actually that goal that is the problem, that we don't live in a utopian world. We live in a world of choices. We live in an imperfect world. We live in a tragic world. And they can't accept that, which leads them to continuously try to change the world into their utopian vision of the future.
What I don't understand, Christopher Rufo, is how anybody can be taken in by the hypocrites who are advancing these theories when you literally look at their hypocrisy. For example, Patrice Cullors, or Cullors, I'm not sure how to pronounce her name. She's one of the co-founders of BLM, Black Lives Matter, and who admitted that she and other co-founders are trained Marxists. Marxism calls for an end to private property. Everything is publicly owned and everything is divided. It's very socialistic in that regard. Yet she it made national headlines over the course of the last 4 or 5 days. She just went on a real estate buying binge and bought 4 different homes worth a combined $3.2 million, including a $1.4 million home in an area of Los Angeles that is 1.4% black. So here's a leader of Black Lives Matter, this Marxist movement against private property, buying private property where she can live among white people.
Yeah, I mean, Marxism for the true believers has actually always been a good business. It's amazing that how it works out in practice is that the people who are in the vanguard, the actual revolutionaries or political leaders or governing officials, always manage to get rich. And the hypocrisy is not so much the point as what it reveals about human nature. Human nature is this kind of normal, universal human idea that you want certain things to be yours. The world is organized into property and land, a house, a car now. You want to have ownership. You want to feel like you are invested in something. And even people that are professed Marxists can't resist that basic temptation. And rather than check their premises, rather than check their views of human nature, what you'll see is that they just lash out and double down and then try to stir up others into following them in their political crusade. And it's really no different now with Patrice Cullors of Black Lives Matter than it was at any time before.
Christopher, I've got a hard break here, but I want you to stick with me. I've got one more segment with Christopher Rufo right after this.
Trending now on the Charlie Kirk Show.
Now, James O'Keefe might be the most hated man from the American left, and that's saying something besides Donald Trump. The only issue that James O'Keefe has, the only issue, is that none of the networks cover his exposés. That no one in the mainstream power structure gives him the distribution he deserves. So that's why we're talking about it today. So now James O'Keefe will be on radio stations across the country in one of the top podcasts, and yes, on our live stream. So James O'Keefe and his team sat down with the technical director of CNN. And this video is so alarming on a variety of different levels. I'm going to let you listen to it for yourself. But the essence of the video is that the technical director for CNN admitted that their goal was to publish propaganda. I kid you not. He uses that word. And to get Trump out.
We got Trump out. I am 100% going to say it. And I 100% believe it, that if it wasn't for CNN, I don't know that Trump would have got voted out.
Our focus was to get Trump out of office, right? Without saying that that's what it was, right?
Trump was, I don't know, like his hand was shaking or whatever. We brought in like so many medical people to like all tell a story that like it was all speculation. That he was like neurological damage, like that he was losing it, he's unfit to, you know, whatever. We were creating a story there that we didn't know anything about. You know, I think that's propaganda.
That's the CNN technical director saying 3 things that should be the #1 news story in the country.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
Burbank is a particularly despicably run city. Their commitment to freedom is an embarrassment. They're the ones I condemned years ago, as I explained earlier. You can't smoke a cigar in a cigar shop in Burbank. Health über alles. It is a form of health fascism, which I've said health über alles, right? Health above all. Power to the restaurant was shut off March 13th after the city received permission from an LA County Superior Court judge to do so. The judges it doesn't matter. There's no recourse. Nobody values freedom. They only value what the health authorities say. It's an amazing thing. These people go to college and graduate school and then question nothing. Oh, the health authorities. That's it. That's all you have to say, health authorities. How about if I think I'll die, I won't go into Tin Horn Flats? How's that? Why is that not an option? Oh, because then I'll give it to others. Well, then you can't have anything? No place can be open. Which is what they wanted and did. Dr. Fauci can't explain why the Texas numbers are not going up. Remember, he warned against that. Texas opened up. Gee, they're not dropping dead like flies.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
After the hour, Bob France sitting in for Larry Elder, joined once again by Christopher Rufo. Christopher wears many hats, carries many titles, among them contributing editor of City Journal, where, quote, I cover critical race theory, homelessness, addiction, crime, and other afflictions. And according to the bio page, my investigative reporting recently led President Trump to issue an executive order banning critical race theory from the federal government. That is an accomplishment, and it would be extraordinarily more important if President Trump had won re-election. But Christopher, it may have been banned from federal government. It is not banned from our schools. As a matter of fact, it is being mandated in schools, not just higher education, but K through 12 as well. Can you talk about the danger and the damage that's going to be done to race relations and just to the mindset and the psyches, particularly of white children, if they are literally forced to become indoctrinated by critical race theory?
Well, critical race theory in schools is something that I've been covering as an investigative reporter for the last several months, and I'll show you how serious the situation is by giving you a few examples. And Cupertino, California, they were forcing first graders to deconstruct their racial and sexual identities and then rank themselves according to their power and privilege. In Springfield, Missouri, they were forcing middle school teachers to locate themselves on an oppression matrix, dividing teachers between oppressor and oppressed. And then in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, they were asking students in fifth grade to celebrate black communism and simulate an Angela Davis Black Power rally in order to free her from prison. And the list goes on and on. These are fairly extreme. The last little example I'll give you is in New York City. A public school principal sent a letter to white parents telling them that they should be they should become white traitors and then advocate for white abolition. This kind of language is becoming commonplace in K-12 schools across the country. I think it's very reckless and dangerous, and we should be on alert.
Okay, now the real question, Christopher, is what does that mean to be on alert? What can we do? Quoting from your speech and the article in Imprimis that they took from your speech, critical race theorists have constructed their argument like a mousetrap. Disagreement with their program becomes irrefutable evidence of a dissenter's white fragility, unconscious bias, and internalized white supremacy. So, in other words, if we try to say, look, this isn't right, this is wrong because of A, B, C, and D, it's just evidence of how right they really are. That white people simply cannot even understand the depth of their own racism, the depth of their own white supremacy, and again, as you point out, white fragility as well. So how do we fight back? How do we correct this terrible wrong, even if we are watching out for it?
Well, the trick is to not get involved in a kind of verbal argument, right? You're not going to convince supporters of critical race theory that the concept of white fragility or internalized white supremacy is a bunk idea. You have to act at the institutional level. You have to say, you have to have your principal or school board or superintendent simply cut it out of the classroom, and that's what many school districts have done. Actually, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis recently came out and announced that he was banning critical race theory from the K-12 curriculum in Florida. I'd love to see every red state governor in the country follow a similar line.
I would too, and unfortunately, that's a strong political move to make, and it's a very dangerous one as well, because you run anytime you speak out against this, you run the risk of being called a racist and a white supremacist yourself. You are continuing to advance, the supremacy and the discrimination against African Americans that this country has always done. Remember this, this full well. Of course, the 1619 Project argued that this country was founded as a slave nation in order to be a slave nation, and has never really lifted itself outside of that mentality. Which brings me, Christopher Rufo, to this question about anti-racism. It's funny how they have all of these terms and they make them sound positive, like equity. Well, it's got an EQU in the front, just like equality, so it must be a good thing, right? Inclusion and diversity, those must be good things. Same thing with anti-racism. Well, who would be opposed to anti-racism? But anti-racism isn't really anti-racism. It is demanding that white people join movements that they do not believe in, or in other words, what anti-racism is to me, and Christopher, is it's anti-white racism. It's asking white people to do things that they should not have to do or be branded as racist. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah. I'd like to go back to the point about Ron DeSantis, and I think that it illustrates the question very well. Where, during the campaign, you might remember that his opponent, Andrew Gillum, accused him of being a white supremacist a number of times. It was a huge story, and Florida voters, though, they didn't buy it. They didn't see any evidence of it, and actually, they punished Andrew Gillum for making the false accusation and delivered a big victory for Ron DeSantis. And I think that is a real model of how to fight this fight. Is you have to be willing to get in there and take the punches. You have to be willing to be called the names, and you have to be willing to stand on principle without fear of being tarred by your opponents. And the question of anti-racism is just another one. You can, a commentator recently said, well, you know what? I'm super anti-racist. It's basically a kind of playing a word game with these people to say, you know what, you can be against racism without being for your particular political ideology.
Right, and at the end of the day, it's always about political ideology, right? This idea of anti-racism, and again, it's kind of a hodgepodge. It's about political ideology, but it is also about the deconstruction of a unified nation by trying to bring about this oppressed versus oppressors that Marxism was built on from the beginning. So politically speaking, it's not just to win political fights in our current political system, but it is to end our current political system and to institute the Marxist principles.
Yeah, that's right, and it's important to get specific because I think your principle is right, but it really is true in the writings of the critical race theorists. They would like a political system where the 14th Amendment, which guarantees an individual right of equal protection, they want to get rid of that and replace it with group identity-based rights. They want to have the power to regulate and control and censor political speech that is not deemed anti-racist by bureaucracy. That would get rid of the First Amendment. And you can go straight down the line. They write it very clearly in their academic work. They want to end the system of individual rights, private property, freedom of speech, freedom of association, and replace it with an identity-based Marxism that, again, has been tried a number of times throughout history and has always failed miserably and always leaves a massive body count in its wake. And we're truly playing with fire, and I think we need to put it out before it gets too serious.
I completely concur. That's why I wanted to have you on, to really kind of underscore what it is and what we're facing, especially those of us who do want to challenge it, knowing that it's going to put us in great peril, put us in great risk. But we have to be gutsy the way, as you said, Ron DeSantis was, and certainly the way Christopher Rufo is for being willing to do this. Christopher, thank you for the research, thank you for the writing, and thanks for joining us tonight. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, Christopher Rufo, founder and director of Battlefront, again, also contributing editor of City Journal. I'm Bob Franson for Larry Elder, and we'll be back.
Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
And how hard was it for 3 vaccines to be created in less than a calendar year? Could you give us some of the inside story? How hard was it to get the U.S. government with the corporations to create that historic success?
Well, it was very hard. We had an FDA that takes a long time to approve things, as you know. You had Fauci saying it's going to take 3 years, maybe much longer. Most people thought you couldn't do it in 5 years. Most people thought you'd never even get a vaccine. I felt confident. And we did something else. We spent billions of dollars on manufacturing the vaccine before we even knew if it was going to work. It was a calculated risk. And if we didn't do that, you wouldn't have had it for 9 months after the date that they announced, which, as you know, because of what I did with drug prices with the favored nations clause, that's going to be the biggest thing ever, assuming Biden keeps it, for drug prices. The drug companies aren't exactly in love with me, and they announced it 2 days after. I think everyone knew we were right there, but they announced it 2 days after. Now, supposing they announced it before, though, Sebastian, the press would have played it down. So if they announced it before, they would have acted like no big deal. When they announced it after, they made a big deal out of it. But between the FDA, who we pushed at a level that they've never been pushed before. So we got the vaccine done in less than 9 months, and it would have taken 3 to 5 years. I don't think they ever would have had it.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Hugh Hewitt Show.
The infrastructure plan is incredibly reckless, It's going to make our infrastructure problems worse because it repeats the failed mistake of the past where we overinvest and we discount the cost of maintaining infrastructure over the life cycle of a project. The fundamental problem is our assets are depreciating and crumbling more quickly than they were back then. And this is going to make that problem far worse. There is so many ridiculous proposals in this bill. And now they're coming to us saying when they have $2 trillion for every grab bag progressive initiative under the sun, that we can't afford to grow the defense budget by 3 to 5% every year. It makes absolutely no sense.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
The Vice President of the United States of America. Honest to goodness, this is like a skit right out of the TV show Veep. You know, bad language, but it's honestly one of the most hysterical political satires in the history of political satires. And Kamala Harris is Julia Louis-Dreyfus. What's her character's name? It's Selena Myers, right? Selena Myers, right. I think Kamala Harris is the actual character played by Julia Louis-Dreyfus in the TV series Veep. Because there's been an announcement made moments ago about Vice President Kamala Harris. You're going to think I'm making this up.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Charlie Kirk Show.
Now, James O'Keefe might be the most hated man from the American left, and that's saying something.
Welcome back indeed. 33 minutes past the hour leaves us 27 minutes before the top of the next hour. Bob France sitting in for Larry Elder. Hope you're having a great day/evening. I'd have a better evening if more people knew the truth about what Georgia's election law does. I would have a great evening if you would sign the petition. Look, we are trying to spread the truth about the Georgia election law and why we support it, despite efforts to smear it with untruths about its content. As long as public companies are getting involved in an effort to hurt the state of Georgia, our company wants to stand behind the truth and correct the record. We also believe that Major League Baseball, as well as Delta and Coca-Cola and other businesses, have been badly misled about the law and should act to correct the record before consumers decide to fly other airlines too late, drink other beverages, and stay away from the ballparks this summer doing it. Seriously, we believe in voting security and the expanded voting access provided by the new Georgia law, and we want you to help us. Join us in doing so. Sign the petition at the top of the page at LarryElder.com. You'll see the Stand with Georgia banner at LarryElder.com. Please do that because it is important. The Georgia law is the right law. And I love that they moved the All-Star game not only to a 76% majority white city from a 51% majority black city, but also to a city in a state that has more restrictive voting regulations than Georgia does. That's just the beauty of it all. The beauty and the simplicity of leftists. It's unbelievable. So we were just chatting off the air real quick before I go to the phone calls, and I do want to hear from you at 888-971-SAGE. We were just chatting off the air about the stunt to try to pack the court this morning, the argument by Ed Markey and others, and they trotted out Ed Markey, and they trotted out Jerry Nadler, and they trotted out Hank Johnson among the liberal progressive Democrats that came out with the press conference this morning to say, we want 4 more Supreme Court justices. 9 isn't enough, and the reason why is because we trail by 3. So if we add 4 more and go from 9 to 13, well, then we'll have 7 and they'll have 6. And our 3-person minority will become a 1-person majority on the court. And, of course, the ignorance of this, there's a reason why. We've had 9 Supreme Court justices since 1869 because some people realize the ignorance and the foolishness of trying to, just for one particular moment in time, have one presidential administration add members to the court to get a simple majority. Then when he loses, sometime in the future, the other side is going to add a few more to get the majority back. And pretty soon we got 75 members of the Supreme Court and they hold no credibility whatsoever. Now, by the way, you don't have to listen to me on that. You can listen to somebody like, I don't know, Joe Biden.
President Roosevelt clearly had the right to send to the United States Senate and the United States Congress a proposal to pack the court. It was totally within his right to do that. He violated no law. He was legalistically absolutely correct, but it was a bonehead idea. It was a terrible, terrible mistake to make, and it put in question, for an entire decade, the independence of the most significant body, including the Congress, in my view, the most significant body in this country.
He was right in 1983, and that is right today. It is a bonehead idea. And by the way, did you notice how clear Joe Biden spoke in 1983? Remember when all of it, during the entire campaign, and his mumbling and his fumbling and his you can't understand a word the guy is saying? They tried to blame it on his stutter. Remember, this is a guy who had to overcome his stutter from earlier in life. And this is just his stuttering. It's not cognitive decline. It's not dementia. It's not, an absence of ability to think. It's a stutter. Remember, don't make fun of the handicapped or people with a stutter. Did he sound like he stuttered in 1983? No, not at all. But I digress. The point is, they came out there with that ridiculous idea today, and one of the members that they trotted out of the progressive left was Hank Johnson. Hank Johnson. And we were just talking off the air, Sean and I, about, I wonder if his, concern, Hank Johnson's concern, or at least if he should be concerned, about having too many members on the court. Because if there are too many members on the court, then it may capsize.
I don't know how many square miles that is. Do you happen to know?
I don't have that figure with me, sir. I can certainly supply it to you if you'd like.
Yeah, my fear is that the whole island will become so overly populated that it will tip over and capsize.
I always have that locked and loaded. They're in our business, and I guarantee you Larry has the same thing, and Dennis Prager and everybody else had. They all have the same thing. There are some sound bites that are just forever and eternal, and they will never be more than an arm's reach away. And when Sean brought up Hank Johnson from this morning and the Guam commentary, in which he asked a United States Navy admiral, if we put too many troops on that island, what if it tips over? That one is never more than an arm's length away from me. That's forever and eternal. I'll be right back.
This is Carol Platt-Liebau for townhall.com. Calling new Biden legislation an infrastructure plan is like calling a shark a dolphin. They both may have dorsal fins, but you mistake one for the other at your peril. Don't be fooled. Only 5% of the bill's spending would actually go for roads and bridges, what normal people think of as infrastructure. Add in items like Amtrak and broadband, and you're still only at 30% of the eye-popping total of $2.3 trillion. And you're supposed to pay for all of this with the biggest tax increase since 1968. Here's what's worse. The bill is actually about leftist social engineering. It would end right to work, something the left hates because it guarantees no one can be forced to join a union or pay union dues in order to hold a job. Ending it offers a rich new source of campaign contributions for Democrats. Calling a shark a dolphin doesn't make it one. I'm Carol Platt-Liebau.
Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
If you are not taking large doses of vitamin D, there's only one possible reason that I can think of. Two. One, you're just not aware of how important it is to your immune system. The other is you're lazy, which I understand. Takes an effort to buy something. But it's pretty minimal effort. Why Dr. Fauci is not screaming vitamin D is infinitely more helpful than masks.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
And how hard was was it for 3 vaccines to be created in less than a calendar year? Could you give us some of the inside story? How hard was it to get the U.S. government with the corporations to create that historic success?
Well, it was very hard. We had an FDA that takes a long time to approve things, as you know. You had Fauci saying it's going to take 3 years, maybe much longer. Most people thought you couldn't do it in 5 years. Most people thought you'd never even get a vaccine. I felt confident. And we did something else. We spent billions of dollars on manufacturing the vaccine before we even knew if it was going to work. It was a calculated risk. And if we didn't do that, you wouldn't have had it for 9 months after the date that they announced, which, as you know, because of what I did with drug prices, with the favored nations clause, that's going to be the biggest thing ever, assuming Biden keeps it, for drug prices. The drug companies aren't exactly in love with me, and they announced it 2 days after. I think everyone knew we were right there, but they announced it 2 days after. Now, supposing they announced it before, though, Sebastian, the press would have played it down. So if they announced it before, they would have acted like no big deal. When they announced it after, they made a big deal out of it. But between the FDA, who we pushed at a level that they've never been pushed before. So we got the vaccine done in less than 9 months, and it would have taken 3 to 5 years. I don't think they ever would have had it.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Hugh Hewitt Show.
The infrastructure plan is incredibly reckless, incredibly reckless. It's going to make our infrastructure problems worse because it repeats.
"17 minutes left in the broadcast as we continue on the Larry Elder Show. Bob France sitting in for Larry in Cleveland, Ohio. I want to pack the final 15 minutes, 16, 17 minutes in with as many phone calls as we can. So if you have been waiting to get through, now is the time. 888-971-SAGE. If you're on hold, stay there. If you're not on hold, get there. 888-971-7243. We're going to go to Ohio again. I like that. The Buckeye State is my home, too. Peter, where are you calling from in Ohio, Peter?
Hey, Bob, calling from Cleveland, Ohio, where we love you here, man.
Beautiful. Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
I just wanted to call in and try to preempt all the haters who are going to line up and call you a racist for your topics and everything. The people on this broadcast, and it's a wide network, need to understand what Bob has been able to do for us in Northeast Ohio. Right now, we're sitting in an area where we have a Republican Party co-chair who's a black female. We have a black female conservative candidate for Congress. We have numerous black candidates for judicial candidates and state representatives, and a lot of that has to do, at least in part, to what Bob's message is. So we here realize that the message isn't about racism, it's about poverty and opportunity, and I want to thank you for passing that message to us and now to America. So I'll hang up and I'll let you comment on it, but I just wanted everybody to know
Well,
that.
Peter, I appreciate that. You know, the sad part about that, and by the way, your check will be in the mail soon. The sad part about that is that you have to recognize it. You shouldn't, right? You shouldn't have to recognize what color the co-chair of the party is. You shouldn't have to recognize that there's a great, strong candidate for Congress to replace Marcia Fudge, who is a conservative woman, that we have to point out that she's a conservative black woman. We shouldn't have to do that. But that's what they've made. In other words, and I've talked about this on my program in Cleveland, which you well know, and I'll tell everybody else as well. The dream is dead. All right? The dream is now dead. It has been murdered. It has been killed. It has been destroyed and buried by the left. The dream I'm talking about is Martin Luther King's dream of a colorblind society where people are not seen by their color, but seen and judged by content of character. And I know it's often repeated, but in all seriousness, just look at what I just talked to Christopher Rufo about. Critical race theory makes it impossible to see people by the content of their character and not the color of their skin. Color is everything in critical race theory, which is being forced into every school at every level in every place in America. and in boardrooms and in break rooms and in training rooms in every business in America. The dream of being colorblind is dead. As a matter of fact, now if you are called colorblind, you are accused of being a racist. How does that work? It really does, though. They're saying that if you're white and you don't recognize the color of the struggle, it's because you're a racist. It's because you're so privileged and you're so insulated from the real pains of black America that you don't recognize black people. You have to not only see the color of skin, but you must feel empathy for whatever it has gone through. Even if not on this person, but that color skin on a previous person in a previous life, in a previous generation, in a previous century, in a previous world. You must see it, and if you don't, then your colorblindness just proves your racism. That's how it's become. That's what it's become. And oh, by the way, not only must you recognize it, white person, not only must you recognize the black struggle and the color of skin, if you are silent about that recognition, if you don't actively speak out against any white privilege that whites may have or any white supremacy, et cetera, then you are also guilty of said supremacy and privilege. Because white silence is violence, remember? So it's not, this is why I worry and I warn people all the time. Choose your child's college very, very carefully. In fact, choose their high schools very carefully. Because if you just think that your child is going to be able to go into school and say, I'm not into politics, man. I don't play those games. I'm here to study and to have fun and maybe play a sport, join a fraternity or a sorority and just experience the life, right? That's all I want to do. I don't get into all the politics. I don't get into that stuff. You're in for a rude awakening. Because if you find out that there is a pride parade flying under or walking and marching under the flying rainbow flag outside on your campus, and you say, I'm not into that stuff, I'm not on one side or the other, I'm just going to stay in here and play Call of Duty, right? You're done. You are homophobe. You must get out here and put on the rainbow shirt and carry the flag and march with us. You can't stay silent. If you're silent, you're violent. Same thing. If you are a white or a black person and I'm just in college to study, man. I'm here to get my economics degree, or I'm here to get my biology degree because I'm going to med school. I'm not here for activism. And you stay in your dorm room while there's a BLM parade going on outside or a rally going on outside your dorm, and you don't come out of that building and pick up a flag and join the crew, you're done. Because your silence meant you are violent and you don't stand and you're not down with the cause. That's where we are. And it's a shame that it has to be that way. It's a shame people can't just say, I see people as people. I don't see them as Caucasian American or Asian American or Hispanic American or Latinx American or African American. They're just American. If you say that, you're done. How insane is this? Let me squeeze a call in here from Ann in Arkansas. Ann, thanks for calling the Larry Elder Show. It's Bob in for Larry. Go right ahead, Ann. All right, I'm not able to bring Ann up for some reason. I'm having a little bit of a problem with the phone screen. Ann, can you hear me?
Hello?
Got you. Go ahead, Ann.
Yeah.
And now we lost her. Apologies, Ann. That was not my intention, but it appears that we have lost you, and I may have accidentally disconnected the phone call. If you would like to call back, we'll put you on after a timeout. We do have a timeout coming up anyway, our final timeout, but I'll try to squeeze a couple of more calls in before the top of the hour and the end of the program. By the way, I didn't give this to you, but I strongly urge you to get on to your favorite video channel. I prefer to not use YouTube personally. Get on Rumble. Find a video channel that has Jim Jordan, Congressman Jim Jordan, today in a congressional hearing, grilling the grand poobah of epidemiology, Dr. Fauci. You're going to love that. I didn't have time to play it, but I will tell you to find it yourself, and we'll be right back.
Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
If you are not taking large doses of vitamin D, There's only one possible reason that I can think of. Two. One, you're just not aware of how important it is to your immune system. The other is you're lazy, which I understand. Takes an effort to buy something. But it's pretty minimal effort. Why Dr. Fauci is not screaming Vitamin D is infinitely more helpful than masks.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
And how hard was it for 3 vaccines to be created in less than a calendar year? Could you give us some of the inside story? How hard was it to get the U.S. government with the corporations to create that historic success?
Well, it was very hard. We had an FDA that takes a long time to approve things, as you know. You had Fauci saying it's going to take 3 years, maybe much longer. Most people thought you couldn't do it in 5 years. Most people thought you'd never even get a vaccine. I felt confident. And we did something else. We spent billions of dollars on manufacturing the vaccine before we even knew if it was going to work. It was a calculated risk. And if we didn't do that, you wouldn't have had it for 9 months after the date that they announced, which, as you know, because of what I did with drug prices, with the favored nations clause, that's going to be the biggest thing ever, assuming Biden keeps it, for drug prices. The drug companies aren't exactly in love with me, and they announced it 2 days after. I think everyone knew we were right there, but they announced it 2 days after. Now, supposing they announced it before, though, Sebastian, the press would have played it down. So if they announced it before, they would have acted like no big deal. When they announced it after, they made a big deal out of it. But between the FDA, who we pushed at a level that they've never been pushed before. So we got the vaccine done in less than 9 months, and it would have taken 3 to 5 years. I don't think they ever would have had it.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Hugh Hewitt Show.
The infrastructure plan is incredibly reckless, incredibly reckless. It's going to make our infrastructure problems worse because it repeats the failed mistake of the past where we
All right, 6 minutes before the top of the hour. Let's try to squeeze a call or two in before we are done. Bob France sitting in, one final short segment here for Larry Elder. And thank you, Ann from Arkansas, for calling back. I feel bad that I disconnected you accidentally. So thank you for your persistence.
No problem.
You're on the air now. Go ahead.
Thank you. Well, I'm from Chicago originally, and I worked at Wrigley Field and never thought I'd see the Cubs win, and now I don't know if I ever want to see another baseball game again as long as I live. I'm so disgusted with MLB.
I feel the same way.
Oh, it's horrible. As far as what you said about the police, one of the things I thought about with this story of this tragedy in Minnesota was that nobody's discussing that the young man who died had tremendous personal responsibility. And that is nowhere in any of the discourse of any of the reporters, any of the news media, because of the narrative of the left to, make this all about race, just like the white man in Georgia who killed Asian women because of a sex addiction became about killing Asian women.
Right.
And it's just incredible that our country so quickly has been taken over. I mean, we knew it would be bad when Trump's election was stolen, and I believe that, and I always will. But I never thought we would see the Democrats systematically destroy everything, every institution from the statues on down in our country. I mean, they can never, ever be trusted with anything again. They can never be entrusted with power because their goals are, they're treasonous. But the problem is they know they're treasonous, and that's why they're stacking the Department of Justice, and that's why they're trying to stack the Supreme Court, because they are trying to insulate themselves from prosecution because they're actually committing crimes at this point. They have gone so far over and above what the Constitution has allowed them to do. And the prosecution of the two girls who killed the Pakistani man through carjacking by tasing him, and he was killed in his own car. Tucker Carlson pointed out on Fox News that they'll see less time in jail than the Capitol rioters. And the takeover is terrifying, and it's like watching it, watching the city, burn to the ground and just going, what do you do? That's kind of where I'm at in the whole thing, is like, what do? We all know what's happening. And as far as woke culture goes, I think the best woke culture is black people who are conservatives, like Candace Owen and Larry Elder and Leo 2.0, and the black people who are realizing that the Democrats are liars and have been defeating them, and they're woke from the being used as pawns. And I've written this on my Facebook page, the BLM is not your savior. BLM is not your messiah. BLM is going to use you to get a bigger slice of the communist, socialist, Marxist pie when the government is carved up. And then when they're done using you, they will throw you out in the trash.
And I'm going to jump in here because I'm out of time. But listen, if we're not Facebook friends already, I want to be your Facebook friend. I want you to find me, okay? Look for Bob France. It's spelled Frantz, and request me, because I would love to engage in more conversation with you. That's going to do it for the Larry Elder Show. Thanks so much for letting me be a part of it. We'll see you next time.